Kisses Are Distracting by Chilly Kitty. Rarity's eyes focused on the soft, silky fabric in front of her, carefully pinning it into place over the mare's chest, making sure to not nick the yellow coat underneath. She stayed perfectly still in her concentration and was grateful that her model was doing the same. Rarity? The quiet Pegasus asked stiffly, not wanting to mess with the work the unicorn was doing. Rarity hummed in response, her mind too distracted by the slippery fabric in her magic gasp to form actual words. Rarity, love, when you have a moment, Fluttershy said. Rarity carefully pressed another pin into the dress. Yes, dear. Her words were hollow as her mind was clearly elsewhere. There's no rush, but, you do need to sit up at some point. Rarity had been hunched over to reach the mare's chest, her face only a few inches away from it for Celestia knows how long. Just as the other had said, she became incredibly aware of the stiffness in her back. She failed to suppress a sigh and straightened out her position, bringing herself eye level with Fluttershy. Before she could complain, there were soft lips pressed against her. She melted in an instant, leaning into the touch. It took longer than it should have for her to come to her senses, but when she did, she pulled away. What was that for, darling? We've been up this for hours. I think we need a break, the quiet mare explained. Ah! Rarity glanced at the clock on the wall, looking just above her glasses. I do suppose it's a bit late. Are you hungry? Fluttershy shook her head. I ate last time you needed to take the dress off to use the sewing machine. Rarity's eyebrow furrowed. Are you tired then? Do you need anything? I'm almost done with this bit, dear. But we can stop if you need. Her voice dripped with concern. Fluttershy smiled at her, eyes wide as if Rarity had just said something foolish. Rarity, you haven't eaten dinner, she stated, and your lunch was half a leftover cupcake. Oh, Rarity mumbled. Well, I just have... Her words were taken by another kiss, cursing the fact that she was standing so close to her mare friend, though she didn't really have any intention to move away yet. Fluttershy broke this kiss after a warm moment. You said that earlier. You didn't let me finish. How would you know what I would say? Rarity pointed out. Fluttershy just rolled her eyes fondly. Because not only did you say it earlier, but yesterday and the day before, and every time you've been engrossed in a project for as long as I've known you. I just have to finish this bit and then I'll take a break, she said with an attempt at Rarity's usual almost Canterlottian accent. Darling, she added after a moment. Rarity huffed and tried to look annoyed, but she couldn't help but smile. I do not sound like that. But you do, Fluttershy said right back, and you sound lovely, even when you're overworking yourself. But if you continue with this much longer... An uncharacteristically sly grin made its way onto Fluttershy's lips. I am going to have to silence you. Oh, and Rarity laughed. She wasn't sure if she ever saw the kind mare so bold. And how do you plan to... She was cut off by another kiss. This one lasted longer and involved Fluttershy humming into Rarity's mouth before pulling away. Rarity was dazed by the taste of the other's lips. I see. Yes, that makes sense. Fluttershy giggled at that, and Rarity all but swooned at the sound. She took a step back to look at her love in the unfinished dress. It was coming along nicely, a pink base with green accents. A few bits of golden shimmering fabric that somewhat matched the yellow mare's coat. That's lovely and all, but I do... She took another step back to dodge the other's incoming kiss. I do need to finish this bit and then I'll take a break, she promised, seeing the doubtful expression on Fluttershy's face. She scoffed. I really mean it, darling. Fine, Fluttershy hummed, allowing Rarity to step closer again without the threat of distracting affection. But don't make me use the stare. I won't, my dear, I promise, Rarity hummed, returning to the matter at hoof. There was another few minutes of silent work. A pin lifted from its place in the pincushion, raised to the green fabric and then delicately pressed into place, attaching it to the pink fabric underneath, and then another and another. She found herself soon fixing and adjusting the other pins into a proper place, zoning out from the world and only thinking of the task in front of her once again. "Rarity?" "Yes, darling, I'm almost done." She'd leaned back to look at Fluttershy, which she should have realised sooner would be a mistake. Not that she could really call the kiss a mistake in any meaningful sense of the word. "I think you're done now." Fluttershy barely leaned back, her breath on Rarity's lips as she spoke. Rarity felt her coat heat up, flushing pink instead of its usual white. Yes, I think you're correct," she barely whispered, closing the distance between their lips once again. They stayed like that for a long moment, wanting to deepen the kiss, but instead pulling away begrudgingly. "Let's get you out of this dress," Rarity mumbled, beginning to carefully undo the pin-filled fabric, careful not to knock out any so she could stitch the green into place later. "And get you some dinner," Fluttershy stated. If she heard Rarity's disappointed grumble, she said nothing. "Yes, love," Rarity eventually said with a sigh, helping Fluttershy slip out of the attire. She laid it out near the sewing machine and turned, once again finding a muzzle against her own. Rarity smiled, kissing the mare in front of her. Fluttershy stepped closer, pressing their chests to each other now that there was no delicate art project restricting her movement. She brought a yellow hoof to push Rarity's red glasses to sit behind her horn. She then lowered the hoof to the unicorn's cheek, holding her in place and kissing her like she was the only thing that mattered. But then she pulled away and Rarity couldn't stop the desperate whine that left her. Fluttershy giggled at that, and really, how could Rarity be mad after hearing that wonderful sound? Fluttershy hummed, releasing her hold of the other's cheek. "I'm going to make you a daisy sandwich, come on." Rarity would have complained and pulled Fluttershy into an embrace, holding her and kissing her until they both were out of breath, but she could feel her own hunger eating away at her, so she instead followed her mare friend into the kitchen. "A daisy sandwich sounds lovely, darling," she conceded. "Must you?" by Twinkletail. "Must you, darling?" Pinkie Pie looked up from a bowl of cereal. She wasn't quite sure what she'd done to elicit such a reaction from her breakfast partner. But the great thing about the question posed to her was that it didn't necessarily mean something negative. Maybe Rarity was just curious. "Must I what?" Pinkie asked through a mouthful of ultra-frosted Frosty-O's. She didn't even have to look at Rarity's face to know what expression she wore, although she did anyway, since Rarity's face was very nice to look at, and quickly covered her mouth, swallowing its contents. "Sorry, I know you don't like it when I talk with food in my mouth, but I didn't want to be rude and not answer your question, so I guess I was rude in a different way instead. Whoopsie." Rarity's expression softened, and she reached across the table to pat her partner's hoof. It was hard to stay annoyed at Pinkie. "It's okay, dear," Rarity said. "I'm certain I could have been patient enough to wait until you were done, but I appreciate the desire to not leave me in the lurch." "Lurch is a funny word," Pinkie offered, grinning a tiny little grin as she perked back up. I guess it is," Rarity responded, almost unconsciously mirroring Pinkie's grin. "We'll add it to the list then." Pinkie clapped her hooves eagerly as Rarity unrolled her scroll of funny words, sliding out of her chair so she could peer over Rarity's shoulder as she wrote this newest one down. Funny words were even funnier when written in Rarity's flawless penmanship. Something about the word tizzy displayed in such a flowery font tickled her in one of her favourite ways. Not her most favourite way though. Only Rarity was allowed to tickle her like that. "And there we are," Rarity stated as she rolled the scroll up once more. "Lurch. A lovely addition." "Totally," Pinkie replied, holding one foreleg in the air. She beamed as Rarity immediately picked up her cue and gave her an enthusiastic high hoof. Then it was straight back to her chair, and she had left her breakfast unattended and undevoured for far too long. And as it would turn out, the devouring would have to wait even longer as a familiar thought swirled up in her little pink head. "So, what must I?" Pinky asked. "Pardon?" Rarity asked before shaking her head quickly. "Oh, I'd completely forgotten." "Gosh, Rares, I'm usually the one that forgets things so quickly," Pinky teased. "Maybe I'm rubbing off on you more than I thought." "Oh, more than you know," Rarity responded. "I was distracted thinking about something you'd done the other day, while I was heading to the spa, and it wasn't until I noticed the little stares from the ponies on the street that I realized I'd been pronking just like you do." Pinkie Pie burst into laughter, to the surprise of no pony. The visual was so entertaining that she didn't even have time to comment on how pronking was also a funny word. Not that it would have mattered if she had. It was already on the list. "I wish I could have seen that," Pinky said between giggles, her mirth only amplified by the combination of blush and an embarrassed smile on Rarity's face. "Well, I suppose I could demonstrate if it would please the lady," Rarity mused. She didn't even wait for a response. Waiting was entirely unnecessary when one knew the other well enough to know how she would respond. Her breakfast temporarily forgotten, Rarity rose to her hooves, perfectly primped and polished, almost in spite of what she was about to do, and began to bounce around the room. "I believe it looked something like this," Rarity shouted as she rocketed past Pinky, who was now in hysterics on the floor. "Am I doing it right, darling? Is this a proper pronk?" Pinky made a feeble attempt at an answer, but it wasn't meant to be. Her usual loquaciousness caused words to flow like water from her muzzle, but this laughter was simply impermeable. A quartet of alabaster hooves landed at her side, and Rarity soon joined in the laughter as she hugged her silly pink partner. "Thank you for the approval, darling," Rarity said, giving Pinky a kiss on the cheek. It was salty, but tears of laughter often did that to a cheek. "It means the world to me." The happy little sigh from Pinky tugged at Rarity's heart, and the organ deftly fought off attacks from her brain, which was frantically trying to remind her that she was currently laying on a dirty floor. "You know I approve of just about everything you do," Pinky said, the earlier uproarious laughter calming into a gentle giggle as she nuzzled her recently kissed cheek against Rarity's. "Just about everything?" Rarity asked, a coy grin crossing her face. "What might I have done that you disapprove of then?" "You made vanilla cupcakes the other day when I really wanted chocolate," Pinky replied matter-of-factly. Rarity raised a brow, giving her partner a bemused smirk. "Oh, really?" Rarity replied. "And you didn't like the 7 of them that you ate?" "I liked them," Pinky responded quickly. "I was just hoping for chocolate." "Well, it's good to know that my largest indiscretion against you was a mixing up of cupcake flavors," Rarity said. "You also snore," Pinky told her. What? Rarity stammered, quickly rising to her hooves. "Pinky, you snore as well." "I know," Pinky said, opting to roll over onto her back rather than stand. "But I snore at a C, and yours is more of an E flat. And I guess that would be fine if we also had another pony snoring at a G, because that would make a good minor chord. But I didn't really think you'd be okay with inviting a third pony too." "You're annoyed that our snores don't harmonize," Rarity exclaimed. "I never said annoyed, silly," Pinky insisted, crossing her forelegs over her chest. "You asked me what I didn't approve of, but it's way too small of a thing for me to get annoyed about." "I suppose that makes sense," Rarity responded. "It sure does," Pinky said, launching herself up to a standing position in a matter that probably shouldn't have been physically possible for any pony that wasn't Pinkie Pie. "I love you too much to get annoyed by something really small that doesn't really mean anything in the long run." With that, the pink pony planted her rump on her chair and munched down another spoonful of cereal, stopping midway to look back at the love of her life. "So, what must I?" Rarity stared back at Pinky,
She was crunching her cereal so loudly yet again, the exact thing that caused her to pause earlier. For the briefest of moments, she considered bringing it back up. As she stared back into those baby blue eyes and thought about their conversation though, you know what? It doesn't mean anything in the long run.
Sweetie Bot Needs an Upgrade by Sock Puppet.
Rarity!
Sweetie Bot shouted, storming into Rarity's boutique.
Rarity!
In here, darling, in here, Rarity called from the kitchen. Sweetie rushed across the boutique and stomped into the room.
Rarity! I need 15 bits!
15 bits? Whatever for?
A month! I need 15 bits! A month!
What? Rarity took her work glasses off and glared at Sweetie. Why? And no, whatever it is, that's a lot of money.
But I need it!
Sweetie whined, eyes sparkling with saline solution. Then you shall just have to get a job, Rarity declared. I understand the cakes need a babysitter. After what the twins did to Pinky, she'll be on crutches for months.
And because I'm made from high-stress aluminum in numb, it's okay for the twins to do the same to me? Don't be such a roboticist!
Rarity closed her eyes and took a deep breath. No! 15 bits a month? Just no!
But it's your fault I need the money, Rarity!
Sweetie declared with another stomp. My fault? How is whatever little crisis of yours, this is my fault? Sweetie paced back and forth, blushing, her towel swishing.
You didn't buy it as a pre-installed module when you ordered me new. And now the Flimflame Robotics wants to sell it to us as a subscription.
What are you talking about? What module?
You know,
Sweetie blushed deeper.
the upgrade module.
Rarity blinked. I do not know. Sweetie, looking at the floor, whispered.
The young lady module.
Rarity blinked again. Puberty? 15 bits a month seems quite expensive, so that you could get to be even moodier and more of a pain in my flank, to be honest. Sweetie rolled her eyes.
No, the tween module upgrades automatically and for free to puberty.
When? Rarity asked. I should put that on my calendar so I can speak to my therapist ahead of time and have him double my big sister's little helper dosage.
The puberty upgrade installs at random,
Sweetie said. Oh? Rarity said. She side-eyed at a locked liquor cabinet before looking back at Sweetie. I shall be adding my own upgrades from the package store then, in anticipation. How do we know when the puberty upgrade has been installed?
According to my manual, I'll start needing 3 times the electrical charge and sleeping more.
Of course, Rarity muttered. That'll cost me at least 15 bits a month.
So,
Sweetie said.
I need your credit card number.
You haven't told me what subscription module you want.
I did.
You said, be a lady? Rarity replied. If you want a gorgeous dress and tips on poise and dictation, I can give you those for free. In fact, it would be my pleasure. Sweetie shook her head.
Not that.
Then I don't understand, darling. Sweetie pulled her iPad from her saddlebag and passed it to Rarity. Rarity's face went from white to a new colour that would have required 15 optical physicists, 4 poets, 9 artists, 6 ophthalmologists, and a trademark attorney to find a name for. No, Rarity said, closing the tab and clearing the browser history. No.
But Rarity...
Sweetie Bot! Rarity stopped, then stopped again. Sweetie Bot, how old are you?
80 trillion clock cycles, almost 18 and a half.
6 months. You are 6 months old.
Don't impose your bionormative units of measurement on me. That's cultural opprobrium.
Appropriation. And no, it is not actually. It's parenting.
I happen to be a complete and up-to-date dictionary.
I'll buy you a better dictionary upgrade.
But I have to have that other upgrade.
What pony put this idea into your head? I'll... Rarity reared to her back hooves and punched the air.
I don't want to use the upgrade,
Sweetie said.
I just want to have it. All my friends have it.
Your friends? Rarity said through gritted teeth. Are biological.
And I feel left out.
Rarity looked at the iPad again. Honestly, Flim Flam is charging for subscriptions to things that ought to be standard. Twilight says her chariot charges 20 bits a month for the airbag subscription.
Scootaloo tried to hack that for Twilight,
Sweetie said with a frown.
Nurse Redheart said she's lucky the airbag only broke her nose, not her neck.
Sweetie bot, Rarity said. I am not buying some bot your age the love-making upgrade. I am not. Not. Whether we call you 6 months old or 18 billion trillion, the answer is no.
Roboticist.
I will not, cannot, shall not buy my little sister, Nookie. Sweetie's eyes crossed and ears trembled, and she made a sound like a farting modem.
Word not found error. Retry idiom.
Rarity frowned. I'm not buying you the dictionary upgrade whether you want it or not.
When will you buy me the other upgrade?
When you're older.
Then, when I'm older, will you buy me the deluxe version?
Deluxe what? Rarity blinked and turned the unnameable colour again.
The deluxe version has an integrated vibe.
Rarity pressed a forehoof against Sweetie's mouth. Up. Silence! I can't have this conversation, or I shall need my fainting couch. Sweetie backed up a step, freeing her lips.
Well, what will you buy me?
So, Apple Bloom said, turning hard left with her steering wheel controller, she bought us this wicked big TV. They sat in the Crusaders clubhouse playing Mario Kart on an enormous wall-mounted plasma screen TV.
Yup,
Sweetie said.
I knew that asking her for love-making upgrade would lead to a big fight, and then any other request I made would seem downright reasonable in comparison. She even threw in 8 bits a month in Nintendo Unlimited. Here, Blue Shell!
Jerk, Scootaloo said, as her Wario exploded, her voice nasally from the still swollen broken nose. I was going to win. Button Mash did a hard turn and drift, his black Shy Guy up on 2 wheels, passing Scootaloo as the explosion of the blue shell faded. Is there really a deluxe option for that upgrade? Button asked, his voice quiet.
There's also Super Deluxe,
Sweetie said.
You won't believe what add-on that comes with.
Button passed out. Ha! Past him, Scootaloo said. I win, despite your blue shell. Alamamamamamamamamian. Alumamamamamamium. Alumamamamamamium. Alumamamamamam that would have required 15 optical physicists, 4 poets, 9 artists, 6 off. Don't impose your normal. That's cultural opprobrium. Pretty and Pink by Silk Rose. Rarity was trotting towards Sugar Cube Corner on her way to ask Pinky to model for her. She decided she was going to make a dress for Pinky as a surprise. Her plan was to make the dress under the guise that it was for someone else, and then ask Pinky out afterward. She would give her the dress they made together. She's had feelings for Pinky for a little while now, so she was looking forward to this. She already had plans and ideas for the gown. It would, of course, be pink. She would make sure it brought out the beauty that she saw in the mare. After a short walk, Rarity arrived at Sugar Cube Corner. She was somewhat hesitant to knock. After this, there was no turning back. She gathered some confidence and decided to knock on the bakery's door. Not at all to Rarity's surprise, Mrs. Cake answered the door. "Hello? Is Pinkie Pie in?" Rarity asked. "Yes, dearie. Do you want to go see her?" "Certainly, darling." Mrs. Cake let Rarity inside and closed the door behind her. Rarity walked up the stairs to the upper part of the establishment, while Mrs. Cake went back into the kitchen. Once Rarity had ascended the stairs, she knocked on Pinkie's door. "Here goes nothing." Pinkie Pie answered the door a moment later and said, "Hey Rarity, what's up?" "Hello, darling. I was wondering if you could be my model for a particular dress?" Rarity asked. Pinkie smiled at her friend. "Sure, when?" "Right now, if it wouldn't be a bother." "Okay," Pinkie replied happily. Pinkie jumped out the door and closed it behind her. They walked down the steps. Once they reached the bottom, Pinkie called out, "Mrs. Cake, I'm going out." Mrs. Cake replied from the other room, "Okay, have fun." Rarity opened the front door with her magic. They walked through it and Rarity closed it behind them. They started walking to Carousel Boutique. "So, who's the client?" Pinkie asked. "You wouldn't know them. They're from Manhattan. Their coat is pink, so you would be the perfect model," Rarity said, looking nervous. "Are you sure?" Pinkie asked. "I know a lot of ponies." "Yes," Rarity said, hoping Pinkie would drop it. Rarity took a moment to admire Pinkie as she hopped beside her, none aware of the feeling she had towards her. She looked at her bouncing pink curls, so adorable, her pink fluffy ears, so cute, her blue eyes, so beautiful. Her thoughts were interrupted when Pinkie asked, "How's your day going, Rarity?" "Good. And yours, darling?" "It's going great." "That's good," Rarity smiled. "Do you have any ideas of how the dress will look?" Pinkie asked cheerfully. "I have a few. We shall see how it goes. Thank you for doing this for me, Pinkie. It means a lot to me," Rarity replied. "No problem, Rarity. I'm glad to help," Pinkie said. Shortly after the conversation had ended, they arrived at Carousel Boutique. Rarity opened the front door with her magic and motioned for Pinkie to go first. "After you." Pinkie Pie walked through the door. Rarity soon followed after and shut the door behind them. "Would you like to eat or drink anything before we get started?" Rarity asked. "Do you have any cupcakes?" Pinkie inquired. "No. How about cake? I've got some left over from a party Sweetie Belle had the other day." "Sure, I love cake," Pinkie chirped. "Let's go to the kitchen and I'll get it out for us," Rarity said, trotting to the kitchen, Pinkie soon following her. Once they were there, Pinkie sat down at the kitchen table while Rarity got the food out. "Would you like some milk with that?" Rarity asked. Pinkie nodded. "Yes." Rarity levitated the cake over the table and cut 2 pieces and put them on their plates. She put the cake back and got the milk from the fridge and poured them each a glass. "Here you are, darling," Rarity said as she laid the plate of cake and glass of milk in front of her crush, then laying hers in front of herself. "Thank you, Rarity," Pinkie said as she started munching on her cake. "It's no problem," Rarity replied. Rarity looked over at Pinkie and couldn't believe her eyes. How on earth does that mare look so cute doing something as simple as eating? Rarity thought. Then started eating to hide her blush. They sat quietly eating their cake and drinking their milk. Once they were done, Rarity cleaned up the dishes. "Are you ready, darling?" Rarity asked. "Yes," Pinkie said. Rarity led Pinkie to a work area and said, "Get on the stand and we can begin." Pinky got up on the stand so Rarity could do her work. Rarity floated over her red work glasses and placed them on her snout. "Why do you have to wear those while you work? You are too cute already," Pinky thought, and turned her head to hide her blush. "Pinky, I need you to look at me so I can make this dress," Rarity said. "Oh, shoot, hopefully she doesn't notice," Pinky thought, reluctantly turning her head to face Rarity. "That's better, thank you, darling," Rarity said. "Good, she doesn't seem to have noticed." Pinky looked at Rarity. She was levitating different shades of pink fabric above Pinky's coat. "You could do this, Pinky. All you have to do is stand here while the mare you have a crush on is a mere foot away. Unknowingly being cute," Pinky thought, gulping. Rarity had chosen the main fabric for the dress while Pinky was thinking and was cutting it in the shape of the main dress layer. Once Rarity had finished cutting it, she laid it on Pinky's back and started staring at Pinky. "Why is she staring at me like that? That doesn't look like a I'm making a dress kind of look," Pinky thought. Rarity stopped staring and floated a sizable piece of fabric in front of her face for a few seconds. When she moved it away, Pinky could notice the barest hint of a blush on Rarity's cheeks. "Why is she hiding her face? What's going on?" Pinky wondered. Rarity moved the fabric around Pinky's back as to level it out. Pinky stopped paying attention to what Rarity was doing, lost in her thoughts. "How long will this take? I don't know how long I can last. I need to tell her. Yeah, I'll do it after we're done making the dress. I can't hide my feelings any longer." "There," Rarity said. "It looks absolutely beautiful." "And so do you," she thought. The dress was pink with 2 layers, one going to within an inch of the floor and 2 going halfway down the dress. It had light blue stitching about an inch from the bottom of each layer that ran along the dress. Going from one side to the other on her chest was a darker pink ribbon with a light blue bow in the centre. Rarity led Pinky over to a mirror so she could see her work. "Rarity, it looks amazing! I'm sure whoever gets it will love it," Pinky said happily. "Well, there is something I wanted to ask you," Rarity said, fidgeting a bit. "Oh, there's something I want to ask you too. Can I go first?" Pinky asked. "Sure," Rarity replied. What else could she want to ask me at a time like this? Rarity thought. "Would you like to go out with me?" Pinky asked, looking nervous. Rarity stood for half a second. Did she just ask me out? "Yes," Rarity answered, leaning forward to hug Pinky in a tight hug. Pinky returned the hug. "I was actually about to ask you the same thing, believe it or not," Rarity said, pulling away from the hug with a slight blush on her face. "Wow, that's amazing," Pinky said with a giant smile on her face. "The dress is yours. There never was a client. I made them up. I'm sorry I lied. I just wanted to surprise you with a dress," Rarity said. Pinky's mouth hung open for a second. Then she closed it and started tearing up. "Oh, thank you, Rarity. You're the best." She wrapped Rarity in a tight hug. They pulled away from the hug and stared into each other's eyes, not speaking. They slowly moved their heads closer until their lips met. They held the kiss for a long while, both parties releasing weeks of pent-up lust and passion into the kiss. Once they were done, they leaned back and just stared at each other for a moment. "Hey, you know what this calls for?" Pinky asked with a big smile on her face. Rarity gulped and said, "A party?"
Falling in Love Again by
a fanatic rabbit. Twilight obsessed over the reflection in the mirror. She reared herself up on the sink, staring at the myriad of imperfections apparent to her. She never felt most of them, but that didn't make them any less real. The wider jaw, the broader shoulders. She pressed an ankle to her neck and chin, feeling the roughness of her fur from puberty slamming into her like a train. It was a little much to hope that her becoming an alicorn would fix all those problems, she supposed. At the very least, the work she could put in, the solutions she could find, all worked much the same. Rather than staring at each little imperfection any longer, Twilight pushed herself back and took in her entire self. Up close, she could easily spot every little detail that might paint her as something other than a mare. Further out, she could see a more complete picture, and the myriad of problems almost disappeared. She could still see them, of course. She knew where to look. If her face were a map, she could give coordinates on every hated geographic point from memory. But further away, she didn't see an atlas of disgust and shame. It had taken her years and plenty of love from friends, as well as learning to love herself again. She was a painting, with new coats of paint being applied over and over, altering and improving the original work, but never replacing it. She'd grown her mane out in the years since she came to Ponyville. She had let Rarity do her makeup to hide some of the things she disliked, and to emphasize what she did. Her eyes, for one, and the shape of her mouth. Twilight grinned, and the feelings of discomfort and surety in who she was intensified. Rarity called from the other side of the door, gently knocking as she did. It startled Twilight out of her thoughts, but she quickly turned and unlocked it, opening up the door to the rest of the boutique, to Rarity standing there before her. "You were in there for a while, darling," said Rarity. "Is everything all right?" She tilted her head just a little, an eyebrow raised a fraction. Her voice took on a familiar tone as she asked the question, and Twilight knew what she was really asking. She felt glad she didn't have to lie for once in a long while. "Never better," said Twilight. "Thanks for doing my makeup. You know I'm hopeless with this stuff." She leaned in and down, pecking Rarity's nose, and the seamstress flushed and chuckled. "Oh, it's nothing, dear. Besides, you're still getting used to this stuff. I had several decades to put it all together and become the professional I am." Rarity made a small gesture with her head, and the two mares walked back down the stairs and toward the main floor of the boutique. "Most of the others are about ready, by the way. Applejack's just helping the little ones get some face paint done." She pulled a face, a stuck-out tongue and played-up grimace. There was still a smile mixed into it. "Face paint is always so tacky." "And makeup isn't?" Twilight asked teasingly. Rarity growled lightly, then tossed her mane back and held up her nose. "That's different. You know that." Twilight giggled and nodded. "Yeah, I know. Still, they're both about making yourself look different, and can be about hiding yourself and celebrating something. What sort of face paintings have they gone for?" Rarity opened her mouth, then cringed as she heard a crash, and a little orange filly fell out of a swinging door. The door smacked against the wall, and Rarity frowned. "Scootaloo?" The little Pegasus blinked, then scrambled onto her hooves. She had 2 little squares of paint on her cheeks, one pink, blue, and white, and the other in shades of orange and purple. "Sorry, Rarity. I hope I didn't break anything." The door was pulled away from the wall, and Rarity ducked around it. There was a slight tensing in Rarity's shoulders, and Scootaloo shuffled back against Twilight's legs. A moment later, Rarity relaxed as she stepped back. "I broke something, didn't I?" Scootaloo asked. Twilight placed her hoof onto the filly's shoulder, and she tensed up for a moment. Rarity shook her head. "Nothing Sweetie Belle hasn't already done herself," she said. "Think nothing of it. Today is meant to be fun." That said, Rarity's expression turned a little more serious. though her grin remained. "Please try to keep the rambunctiousness out of my house for now, Scootaloo nodded and buzzed her wings. "I promise I'll behave until we leave," she said, and she went through the motions of a pinky promise. She took a few steps back to the door, then paused before whirling around to look back at Twilight. "Hey, want to get some flags painted too?" "Like yours?" Twilight asked the Pegasus. Rarity glanced up and down between Twilight and Scootaloo, and as the alicorn grinned and answered, "Yes," the seamstress let out a small groan. Ponyville was full of noise, since Twilight's castle had sprouted from the ground, making the once small and sleepy little town a centre of tourism and the home of friendship and harmony. Now it saw far more celebrations. Twilight had seen parades like this in Canterlot once in a while. She never paid that much attention to them, having refused to accept who she was. Now she felt her heart swell up like a balloon and try to lift her off the ground. She understood a little of what it must have been like to be Pinky on an average day. The market was much busier than usual. On top of the usual food stalls, there were booths for games and activities. The space that was usually reserved for just the Apple family's little cart was now a marquise, and several booths selling apple-flavoured treats and a few more rural-styled activities that could be safely practiced in the town centre. Twilight recognised only a hooful of the extended family, and only one by name. Twilight insisted on paying Apple Fritter the bits for the pair of candied apples she picked, and then gave Rarity one of them. "Apples, there's something new," Rarity said flatly, though she chuckled a moment later regardless, and tried to delicately bite into it. It was, unfortunately, just a little too large and glossy for her to simply nibble, forcing her to take a larger bite and get some caramel stuck to her cheek. It left a silly orange streak right beneath the purple and pink heart painted below Rarity's eye. Twilight chuckled and took a braver bite herself. It didn't help keep her face clean. She hadn't even swallowed her first bite before she felt a napkin prodding at the side of her face and wiping the melted sugar off. "Honestly, Twilight, you can be so messy sometimes." She made sure Twilight's face was clean, then tended to her own sticky fur. "A lady doesn't take big bites out of her food." "Well, it's a good thing I'm not a lady then," said Twilight, taking on a slightly more serious tone. Rarity paused, then frowned. "Twilight, don't..." "I'm not a lady. I'm a princess," Twilight smirked, then Rarity rolled her eyes before giving her mare friend a small shove. "You are insufferable sometimes, you know that?" Twilight shuffled back beside Rarity, their bodies touching, and she flicked her tail around to fall into Rarity's tightly spun coil. "You love it, really." "No, I do not," Rarity protested, and Twilight kept smirking, using her height to loom down onto Rarity. "Okay, maybe a little. A lot. Stop smirking at me like that." Twilight giggled and kissed Rarity on the forehead. "I can't help it. You're cute when you pout." Rarity pouted harder, opened her mouth to say something, then took a large, unladylike bite out of her candied apple. This just made Twilight laugh again and grin. She watched Rarity eat as they walked, remembering to take a bite from her treat every once in a while. Somewhere ahead, Fluttershy was chaperoning the Crusaders, helping them out of too much trouble, though they did get a few stern words thrown at them from the odd stall owner, and even Rarity herself. The girls tossed back apologies, and frowns turned to smiles as they let off their energy elsewhere, and slowly bankrupted Fluttershy as they collected balloons and trinkets and snacks aplenty. Despite that, and despite the noise, the volume of the ponies around them, Twilight couldn't take her focus off of Rarity, and off of herself. She chewed on another mouthful of her apple, and reflected on what her life was like before, how dark and bleak it was. Despite how good and capable she was, maybe it was only such compared to the bright, gleaming hope and love she saw in Rarity and her other friends, but it was definitely much better now. Rarity caught Twilight's stare, and another errant smear of caramel. She floated up another tissue. "What's on your mind, Twilight?" Twilight made a small noise. "You've got that look about you, like you're thinking too hard." Rarity chuckled. "Reminds me of the times I caught myself snagged by my muse." "Maybe not quite the same." She ensured Twilight's cheek was sparkling clean once more. "Do you want to share?" Twilight hummed, then shrugged. "I'm just thinking how much I love everything right now." She gently bumped Rarity, making her drop her appleless stick, though Twilight caught it before it hit the floor. "You especially, of course. But just in general too. The girls, all the other friends we have, everything seems so sunny." She bit her lip. "That sounds sappy, doesn't it?" Rarity gently bumped her cheek against Twilight's, and the little electric shock of love and acknowledgement made the hair on Twilight's back stand up. "Not at all, love." Rarity stopped and turned to face Twilight head on. Twilight did the same and took another bite from the remains of her apple. "Loving being alive isn't sappy. It's wonderful and delightful. It reminds me that the mare I fell in love with is worth all my effort and attention." Twilight gently ran a hoof in circles on the floor. "You think so?" "I know so. I know you have a unique experience with life." She then leaned up, kissing Twilight's lips. They held together for a few moments, and then the sticky sugar pulled apart as they separated. "It's good to know that despite that, you've taken to life like you've taken to every dress I give you. It fits you perfectly and brings me an endless amount of joy to see." Twilight's heart almost burst, and they kissed again.
Rarity, I'm Pretty Sure You're Dead by Jest. Like 90% sure. "That's preposterous, darling," replied Rarity, not looking up from her sewing. She was on a delicate double over-under stitch that needed to be just so. Twilight tapped her hoof and frowned. "I'm quite sure you're dead. You're ice cold to start." Rarity shrugged, hardly giving the conversation a single iota of attention. "Yes, I suppose it is a little chilly in here. Would you mind turning up the heat when you leave, darling?" Contrary to popular belief, Twilight Sparkle was not completely lacking in social graces and knew most of the normal cues to leave, but she chose to ignore what her friend said. After all, she had just lost said friend. Well, sort of, anyway. "Rarity, your body is literally room temperature all the way through. I've scanned you completely." Twilight tried to impart a modicum of seriousness in her voice, but Rarity brushed it off. "Oh, pish posh, darling. It might be a little cold out today, but it's nothing to get worked up about." She leaned in closer, focusing her magic to the size of a head of a needle. This last part right near the hem would be difficult and would take every ounce of concentration she had. Twilight groaned. "Rarity, this is serious." "Yes, I know it's serious. The weather team should really decide if they want it sunny or cloudy. None of this annoying in-between business that makes the day so blah." She flipped the dress over and instantly began working on the other side. Fine. Well, explain this then, Rarity. Why haven't you had to breathe the entire time I've been here?" Twilight's confident smile faltered somewhat when she realised the dead unicorn in front of her was still locked to her work. "It's called holding one's breath, darling. You really should try it sometime," Rarity said with as little malice as she could manage. "The whole time I've been here though, it's been 10 minutes. You can't hold your breath that long. No pony can." Twilight threw her hooves up in exasperation. "Not so, darling. You would be quite surprised what the girls and I have gotten up to in that hot tub of yours." Rarity casually twisted the dress in her grip and bit her lip, not noticing when the appendage fell off a moment later, when she realised what she had done wrong. "That was you who did that to my hot tub? I had to throw out all the water and scrub the entire thing. You could have at least told me." "Told you what? That me, Fluttershy, and Big Mac had a little too much fun in your not-so-secret hot tub on the 4th floor balcony? If I said that, our shy friend would just die from embarrassment." With a flick of her magic, the offending stitches were ripped out and the sewing machine was kicked back into high gear. "Whatever, I'll lecture those two on respecting private property later. I have a leech on my hooves right here." She pointed an accusatory hoof at the oblivious fashionista still staring intently at the dress. "You should think about getting that removed. I heard Salt could take those little buggers right off." "Not leech, lich, like an undead evil sorcerer, not the mildly annoying parasite." "Ah, I see. Well, would you kindly ask the evil undead sorcerer to leave my boutique alone? I have quite the order from Celestia herself, and as the world, as my witness, I will not fail." Without taking her eyes or magic off her stitchwork, she raised a triumphant hoop in the air and held it for a moment before letting it drop down and help its twin push a difficult part of the dress through her machine. "You're impossible, you know that? I think you can be more stubborn than Applejack sometimes." Twilight dropped her butt to the ground and rubbed her chin deep in thought. Rarity didn't remark, though she did disagree. There were more important things at Hoof after all, like what to do with this extra dangling bit of fabric she had left attached to the edge of the dress. Should she cut it off? No, that wouldn't do. It looked almost good where it was. It just needed some... Aha! Idea! She folded it neatly into a stylized sun and tucked some loose cotton into it to give it some form. Then, with a quick flourish of her needle and thread, it was sewed together nicely and attached to the main dress by a thin sunbeam. She levitated the dress further away to scrutinize her work, taking extra notice of the dangling sun hanging from the edge of the fabric. It looked so good. It just needed something more... it didn't match. She would make a little sun on both sides, and it would be perfect. Meanwhile, Twilight Sparkle had come up with the perfectly logical argument that was sure to convince Rarity. "Rarity," she stated firmly, hoping her confidence would help her dead unicorn friend see reason. "You have not pooped in 4 days." That made Rarity stop for all of a second. "The frequency of a lady's bowel movements is none of your concern. Furthermore, I must ask you to no longer spy on me in the loo. It is quite uncouth." She then went back to sewing. "What? That's... what?" Twilight shook her head. "I have done none of that. I just scanned your bathroom as well as your, internals and... Miss Sparkle, you better choose your next words carefully and explain to me why you just admitted to scanning my internals. Or so help me, I will sew your eyelids closed." Her words were like ice that shot through Twilight's veins, and for a split second, some deep animal instinct commanded the alicorn to run in the face of this superior predator. Her logical side, however, like usual, won out in the end. Surely a well-reasoned and thoughtful explanation would suffice, right? "Well, like I was saying, it started off because I wanted to see if your heart was still pumping, which it wasn't. But then I grew curious about what else in your body had shut down. Your brain is completely inert, your circulatory system has stopped completely, and your entire digestive tract is about to eat its way through your midsection in a few minutes." Despite the fact that she was fairly certain her explanation was enough, Twilight Sparkle couldn't help but sweat. Rarity stopped sewing and lifted up the dress she had been working on. It was a relatively simple number, a lithe black dress that was both dark, utilising light black to deep grey fabric, but had little shocks of yellow running through it. It was a cocktail dress Luna had commissioned since she felt something that symbolised both her and her sister would help spread the idea that they truly were equals. It was perfect, though hard to come by, and even harder to perfect. The idea of blending dark and light motifs had taken off quite spectacularly, and had even given her several spin-off ideas she intended to work on later. She frowned. Apparently Twilight was still going on about something or another while she had been staring at her work. What had she been saying? Something about eating? Yes, darling, I know you're hungry, but we could grab you a hayburger in a minute. Right now, I really need to finish these dresses. Without bothering to listen to the response, Rarity placed the dress back down and started ripping out a small set of stitches, already thinking up a much more elegant solution. Come on! Are you even listening to me? Twilight pleaded. Unfortunately. Twilight snorted in anger and stomped her hoof in frustration, but a sudden idea stopped her fuming. Rarity? Yes, darling. I will let you give me a full makeover and a new wardrobe if you listen to what I have to say for just 5 minutes. That gave Rarity pause. And throw out that dreadful black hoodie? Oh, come on, that hoodie is nice and comfy. The perfect study hoodie, Twilight pleaded, remembering all the late night study sessions her and her favourite hoodie had been through together. Then no deal. Twilight huffed but ultimately resigned herself to her fate. Gone were the days of cosy reading sessions and warm Sunday mornings. Fine, I will throw out the hoodie. Rarity's chair swiveled to reveal a face and body that was already beginning to decompose. Her face sagged pretty much everywhere, and she was missing most of her lips, which seemed to rest all over the ground in various half-chewed pieces. What, is there something on my face? Rarity asked, reaching a hoof up to touch her face. No, it's nothing. I just thought I left the stove on for a second there. Twilight gently grabbed Rarity's hoof and pushed it back to the ground. Anyway, how long have you been working? You missed our picnic with Pinkie Pie and Applejack. They both made really good pies. Twilight was desperately trying not to stare at Rarity's right eyelid, which drooped slightly more than what was normal. She was failing horrendously. I don't know, a few hours I would think. Rarity tapped her chin and looked off towards the clock. I must have pulled an all-nighter by accident. Funny, I don't feel tired. When did you start work on your order from the princesses? About 3 in the afternoon. About a half hour after I received their letter from that nice new courier. What day did you start work? What day was it yesterday? Monday, I think. Yes, that's it. Rarity looked around her workshop, noting the flurry of designing and sewing had left it in a dreadful state of disarray. Rarity, it's Sunday. What are you trying to say, darling? That I went back in time or something? Rarity snorted in amusement. I don't work that hard, you know. No, it's been 6 days since you got that letter. Our picnic was on Wednesday, remember? Rarity's eyes glazed over, and for a split second Twilight panicked whether or not her friend had gone blind all at once. Then all of a sudden they went back to normal, and her gaze refocused on the alicorn. Give me a mirror, the unicorn demanded. Twilight broke out into a nervous sweat and instantly moved between Rarity and the closet washroom. I don't know if you should do that. You're kind of, well, falling apart. Twilight Sparkle, if you don't move right this instant, I will sew every orifice of your body closed. Rarity's eyes narrowed, her right eye slightly more than the left, taking away from her intimidation somewhat. However, that was still more than enough to scare the, thankfully not literally, piss out of Twilight. Yes, ma'am. Twilight leaped to the side, one part jump, one part a pump of her wings. Rarity was gone in an instant. bolting towards the bathroom. "Here it comes!" Twilight magicked her ears shut and winced, looking away from the bathroom. However, after a few moments and still no ear-splitting shriek, Twilight opened one eye and looked towards the bathroom. A second later, a blank-faced Rarity exited the bathroom, her entire body rigid. Her face wore a mask of indifference. "How did this happen?" Twilight gulped. "Well, some think that when a very powerful unicorn with immense willpower dies, sometimes their will combined with their magic mix into a potent form of dark magic. The dark magic combined with the unicorn's overriding willpower leads to a self-resurrection and subsequent state of undeath. But that's all theoretical." Twilight gulped again. "Well, not anymore, I suppose." Rarity's eye twitched. "Twilight Sparkle, pack my things. We are going to Canterlot. I need a new body ASAP, and I need as many pictures of myself as you can find." Rarity's magic grabbed a sewing machine, needle and thread, and all manner of fabric, stuffing and throwing them into a waiting trunk. Twilight nodded and ran for the door, stopping at the last second. "Rarity, what are you planning on doing? You're not gonna kill some pony that looks like you and take their skin or something, are you?" Rarity, however, hardly noticed. She stared intently at a piece of paper, her magic working a pen at nearly lightning speed. "No, nothing so barbaric." She stopped and paused to chew on her lip while she thought, only to realise she had no more lip left to chew on. "I'm going to make a new body." She smirked, though the expression was lost as she had no lips to emote with. She flipped the paper around and revealed a quick but detailed sketch of a life-sized Rarity doll. "Oh, thanks, Celestia." Twilight wiped the sweat from her forehead. "I have not quite mastered soul transference spells anyway, and Why are you looking at me like that?" Rarity squinted at the alicorn. "Were you really okay with helping me murder some pony and steal their body to wear like some dress?" "No." "Well, maybe." Rarity shook her head and frowned scornfully. "Honestly, Twilight, you couldn't have been more dead wrong." Twilight groaned. Symbiosis by Silent Whisper. It took a moment for the silence to fully register when Rarity first awoke. But the realization that she was alone was enough to startle her into full awakeness. She blinked a few times, risking a little bit of magic to wipe the crust from her eyes. Her hooves, pleasantly numb, walked onward, and she only stumbled a little bit as her conscious will took control of her movement. A cursory glance around was all that she needed for most of her instantaneous anxiety to fade. The sunlight was still filtering in through the glass roof and the right side windows, surrounded by a sea of stars. She was safe, and more importantly, she was still going the right way. All it had taken as a filly were a few horrifying rumours of ponies getting turned around for the fear of the light on the left to settle in. If it was on the right, then she was right. All right. All right. She smacked her lips and trotted over to the right, keeping a steady pace forward as she did so. A strip of panelling chimed pleasantly as she walked over the pathway. tilting back her head. Rarity opened her mouth as a trickle of water dripped from a pipe above her, matching her pace perfectly so she could drink. Some landed in her mouth, rinsing the taste of the previous night away, but most of it landed on her back. Humming to herself, she stepped off the water path and looked around. It really was quiet when no pony else was around. The hallway sloped almost indiscernibly upwards, both behind and in front of her, shrouded in a mist that kept her walk pleasantly humid. Ugh, it was going to be a boring day, really, if no pony else was around. Had she fallen behind? She tried to clear her head, focusing on how she felt. No, her energy levels were fine. Better than usual, actually. She must have kept a fantastic pace during her rest. Was every pony else just... Out of the way! A hoarse shout cost Rarity a few missed hoof steps before she regained her steady, even gait. She looked back to see a pair of ponies moving rather urgently towards her. "Move it, Ivy!" wheezed the stallion of the two, propping up the breathless mare next to him as they awkwardly shuffled past her. "Roseluck here's going to pop any minute!" Ivy. Rarity made a face. They made it sound so dreadfully common. At least her plant wasn't of the fruiting variety. She could see the grapevines winding their way around the stallion's limbs, making his trot an awkward, uncomfortable looking one. "Best of luck," she said after a moment, watching the pregnant mare waddle as fast as she could into the brightly lit fog ahead of her. She mostly meant it too. Foal birth was one of the most risky things a pony could do, and it baffled her that mothers who survived the process often decided to do it again. But she supposed it was in the best interests of pony kind that they continued to have foals. Many didn't make it after all. Many couldn't keep up with the light. She rustled her back gently, enjoying the feeling of cool leaves brushing against her coat. Since the food crisis, after the few months of eternal night, there had been many desperate studies on how to keep equestrians alive when most of the vegetation had died. Her ancestors had been a part of the only one, as far as any pony could figure, that had worked. The few surviving species of plants deserved as much of a fighting chance as the ponies who depended on them after all, and the brilliant plan had been to make the dependency mutual. Sure, it probably had cost them Equestria, wherever they'd left it, but she was still alive, ponies were still alive, even if they weren't quite completely pony anymore. Muffled hoofsteps sounded from behind Rarity as she perked up. She must have gotten towards the front of the herd then, if ponies were catching up to her like this. Perhaps later she'd slow her pace down and see if she could find where the others were. "Oh, it's just you, Rarity." She looked back and beamed. What fortune! Some ponies she actually knew. "Rainbow Dash, it's wonderful to see you, darling. How have you been? You're looking healthy?" It wasn't true. The chrysanthemums on Rainbow's back were wilting, with most of the petals looking rather shredded. It figured that of all these ponies, Rainbow would get a gorgeous flowering plant, while Rarity was stuck with mere, admittedly attractive, leafy vines. Leave it to a Pegasus to be able to resist the urge to fly while in full bloom. Yeah, look, they were already starting to fade anyway. Rainbow made a face as she matched Rarity's speed. "Did you see Roseluck go by? How many ponies were with her?" Humming, Rarity peered into the mist. Just one was with her, a stallion, also an earth pony, a grape species, if I'm not mistaken. Rainbow scoffed a hoof against the floor. "Ugh, no clue where Lily went then. You sure you didn't see any pony else walk by?" "I did not. It's entirely possible I missed something. If she went by earlier, I did just awaken." Rainbow blinked, frowned. "Really? And you're all the way up here?" She shrugged, staring out the window, watching their reflections against the stars beyond. I suppose I just walked rather quickly in my sleep. Isn't that what you usually do? Why, I'm surprised. Rarity cut herself off before her mouth could get ahead of her brain. Why had Rainbow been behind her anyway? Sure, said Rainbow after a moment's pause. I'm the fastest there is. You know that. Every pony knows that. Maybe Lily just went ahead of the other two, and we both missed it. Something about that didn't quite sit right with Rarity, but she let it pass. Have you seen the herd? I'm fairly certain I've gotten ahead of most of them, but I haven't reached the ones who chased the sunrise edge, so I can't be that far from the others, right? Rainbow shifted her wings uncomfortably. A few more pale petals fell limply into her feathers. Yeah, you're about 10 minutes ahead of them, Rarity. I'm glad I found you. I actually wanted to talk to some pony, away from... Shh! Rarity shushed, squinting ahead. Something was ahead of them. In the slowly rotating ship, something dark and motionless. Oh no! Rainbow saw it a few seconds after Rarity had. Roseluck! The Pegasus shouted and bolted forward, leaving a few leaves in her wake, but her concerns were elsewhere. No! This can't be happening! Where's Time Turner, Rose? The figure didn't answer, but one hoof shifted slightly forward. It looked, Rarity noted with queasy disgust, as though there was a good deal more fluid lost than there probably should have been. She looked away as she slowly made her way towards the pair, staring into the starry void outside the window, keeping the view from rotating. Why would he... Rainbow swallowed audibly. Why would he leave you? Foal, alive, had to keep moving, gasped a voice, almost too softly for Rarity to make out what was being said. But no, Rose, you can't do this. You can't give up. You can't... She can't get up, darling, Rarity interrupted. Her foal lives on. Maybe it's even a rose bush like its mother. But she can't keep up. And if she can't keep up... She bit her lip, unwilling to finish the phrase. A prismatic blur whipped around Rarity, shredding another fated petal. You're saying we should just leave her to die? Alone? The herd's not too far behind, and the sunset line's under an hour away. If she falls into the dark side of the path, she'll... Rarity sighed. She knows, Rainbow. You said most of the herd's not too far behind. Some pony will stay with her and talk to her, if she makes it to them. It's likely that her last moments will be in the light, with friends. That's more than most get. Yeah, spat Rainbow, because most get left behind if they're too slow. They... How? Said Rarity softly as a thought occurred to her. Did you know that the sunset line is under an hour away? No answer. She had to tear her gaze away from the window and mist ahead to make sure Rainbow was still with her. The Pegasus refused to meet her gaze. You didn't know where Lily was? Did you just wake up too? But you've always been a fast sleepwalker, Rainbow. She gave Rainbow's back a cursory glance, noted the bulge of roots under her skin, too prominent for any healthy pony. Your plant is sick, dearest. Are you not getting enough energy? I'm fine, spat Rainbow. It's every pony else here who isn't. I needed to talk to you about this. Or to some pony. Rarity quirked an eyebrow warily. Oh? Yeah, listen. So this satellite's round, right? A big, giant wheel? Rainbow gestured upwards. Rarity looked and squinted at the angled mirrors that redirected the sunlight towards her above the glass of the walkway. As far as we know, yes. The sunlight reflects in to feed our plants, which feed us. But it rotates, said Rainbow. So we've got to walk to follow the sun. Why? Because, explained Rarity gently, if we sat still forever, we'd die. Okay, so that makes a sort of sense, but if it's a round wheel, why do we never see the bodies of those who've fallen behind and died? What happens to them? When the plants fully wilt and try to make the last bits of nutrients from the ponies within them, shouldn't we be tripping over skeletons by now?
Rarity had an answer for the first part, at least, unpleasant as it was. It was something she'd thought about. Perhaps the ship disposes of them after they reach a certain point in the dark. Perhaps it burns them as fuel to keep the ship spinning. That doesn't explain the water! Rainbow snapped, eyes wide and wild. That doesn't explain the mist! We can't live off of just water, and neither can plants! The whole topic was beginning to make Rarity a little uneasy. Well, perhaps the plants of Equestria couldn't, but these plants are grown to work with us, and us with them. We give them motion, sunlight and breath, and they give us energy. Do you know how plants used to grow? Rainbow's voice was softer, but for some reason it chilled Rarity more than when she'd been almost shouting. They used fertilizer. I don't think. Do we even know what water tastes like anymore? It's been longer than any pony can remember since we left Equestria. Is our water even water? Or it could be made of... Enough! I'm quite tired of your disturbing. No, Rarity! Fertilizer is made of dead things and recycled nutrients. Do we even know what's above the mirrors on this ship? Or below the floor panels? Is some monster driving us to walk in endless circles? Maybe... And her voice dropped to a hushed whisper, barely audible over their hoofsteps and the comforting rustle of the plants on their backs. We're being rotated forever on purpose. Maybe some pony or something doesn't want us to see what happens to those who die. Rainbow, this is ridiculous. It's not though, is it? And Rainbow was almost shouting again. Do we know what's in our water? Have we been drinking the corpses of our friends? For any pony else, Rarity would have laughed at them and immediately sought out new company. But it was Rainbow, and for Rainbow and the last dregs of whatever friendship they had, Rarity gave it a few moments of consideration. It was ridiculous, of course, but even so... Why? Rarity asked, then paused as she heard her own voice shaking. She cleared her throat before continuing with the answer she felt she had to give. Why would that bother me? Rainbow's jaw dropped. What? How can you... It's a different time, Rainbow. We're ponies, but we aren't equestrians, and there may be none of us left anywhere in the universe. If this is what keeps us alive, then it's rather unpleasant to think about, but we still kept every pony going. Rarity nodded, mostly to herself. Yes, it sounded better, more acceptable when she said it out loud. It wasn't enough to fully convince her, but that'd be a thought for a future time, and perhaps further discussion later on. So, let me get this straight, said Rainbow Dash softly, staring Rarity down. You're saying that eating other ponies doesn't even bother you? Rarity scoffed. Well, of course I find the idea disturbing, but I don't think there's much to be done about it. If that is what's truly happening, honestly, Rainbow, you've gotten yourself so worked up over a theory. I'm sure there's another explanation for where the, deceased have gone. Perhaps it's merely a sanitation measure. She chuckled, swallowing back a strange bout of anxiety. Why, if I give it a bit more thought, I'm sure there's a far simpler explanation for all of this. Yeah, I'd love to hear anything else you've got. How are we still alive, Rez? This is the only explanation I can think of that takes everything into account, and I can't believe you aren't taking this seriously. The only thing worse than Rainbow staring her down, Rarity noted, was when Rainbow didn't look at her at all. Rarity sighed. I am, darling. Truly I am. I admit I don't have a better one off the top of my head, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist, and I think any answer would be far less horrible than the one you've convinced yourself is reality. She stumbled as an awful thought occurred to her. Wait, you'd fallen behind and your plant is looking rather unwell. How long has this thought been bothering you? There was no immediate response, and that made Rarity's pulse race as she put the pieces together. Have you not been drinking, Rainbow? No, the Pegasus said softly. I haven't. Darling, what are you even thinking?
You and your plant must work together to stay healthy, or it'll start looking further than your bloodstream for nutrients and fluids. You know that you need to stay hydrated. Something was wrong. It was too quiet, and it took Rarity a few moments to realise that her own hoofsteps were the only ones she could hear. Rainbow had stopped. Was she so sick that her legs had locked up? Rarity turned her head and slowed her pace slightly. "Are you okay? What are you doing?" Rainbow laughed from where she stood and sat down. "Joining Roseluck," she whispered and rested her head between her hooves. "Not that it matters much, since not even my best friend seems to care that she's eating ponies." "Rainbow, come back! We can still talk about this!" shouted Rarity, slowing as much as she dared, watching as her friend slowly faded into the mist behind her. "Don't give up! You have to keep walking! You have to!" But silence answered her, and then there was nothing to distract Rarity from her distressing thoughts but the whisper of leaves against her back as she left her friend behind. Disaster Rarity by Haphazard. I have made a mess of myself so habitually that even despite the crushing emotional damage that ravaged my soul that, quite frankly, there's a not inconsiderable section of my consciousness that recognises this as supremely normal. With precise regularity it mutters, "Ah yes, this tracks completely. Deploy the ice cream." Which is a statement I will echo out loud. This tracks completely. Deploy the ice cream. Excuse me. Please do not be alarmed by the streaking mess that is my tears, ruining my elaborately applied makeup. It's normal. Perfectly according to plan. Yes, just don't look at me, please. I'm quite serious. My makeup is important business. I'm a mare of immense self-reliance and therefore always keep a fully stocked freezer packed with ice cream for all occasions. Because this is what I do. I am me, and this is how, as a me, I deal with my inability to form any kind of us. Trust me, I have this under control. No, I'm not choking. This is normal. My eyes are just leaking and there is a small blockage in my throat. Just a minor case of phlegm. Unattractive but harmless. I'm fine. Let's talk about ice cream, please. My favourite is cherry flavoured. I like how it tasted like a sort of swirl, even though my understanding of the mechanics of taste buds indicates that tastes do not in fact swirl, but it feels like it does. And I was an artiste. I'm all about feelings and self-destructive tendencies in the name of art, with an E. Again, and forgive me for my belabouring at this point. I apologise that you have to be here for this, but this is my routine. If you insist on being here for this, please just sit down and please don't hold this against me. I'm about to swear. Fuck me. Celestia fucking damn it. I'm such a fucking idiot. Fuck. It's habitual that I interrupt these tirades with a mouthful of cherry-flavoured ice cream. Do stand by, darling. Oh, fuck! I realised I have forgotten to include my aperitif with the dessert. Yet another mistake for the landfill that is my romantic existence. What a dumpster fire. Excuse me, I need a bigger bowl for the ice cream. Actually, let's do away with the bowl. It is complex indeed to swear whilst eating ice cream, so I suppose the more I shovel into my stupid face, the less I'll do it. Profanity is decidedly unladylike, and moreover ice cream dribbling down one's chin is not attractive. A lesson learned many years ago, several times so. My heart has been, after all, habitually broken. Oh, the experiences I have had. Let me recount them to you in excruciating detail. Suffering demands company, and you seem to be set on joining me along this miserable meltdown. Let me begin with the very first love of my life. When I was a young mare just having gotten my cutie mark, my first romantic escapade was with a young mare I'm sure you're familiar with. She's a natural heroine these days, Applejack. We were young, adventurous, exploring an affection we felt towards other mares, and thoroughly, completely, utterly unsuited towards one another. We wanted different things. We wanted different types of ponies. I wanted, at the time, some pony to fawn over me and spend time with me. Applejack wanted some pony who knew how to tie a knot. That's not a metaphor either. She explicitly listed it as a requirement for a long-term relationship. She said it indicated reliability. I'm not sure that, at the time, we could have found a less suitable partner for the other. As Rainbow would say, oopsie fucking whoopsie. It was hot though. The breakup was nuclear and we didn't talk for about 2 years afterwards. Imagine my horror when we accidentally became element bearers. If the cosmos doesn't have a sense of humour, then it certainly has a penchant for malice. Applejack got over it. I didn't. In fact, she got over it so well she ended up marrying another friend of mine. Oh, don't mind me. I'll get to Rainbow Dash soon. I'm not bitter. And that's called foreshadowing, darling. My eyes may be leaking, but not even a broken heart will quell my storytelling talents anyway. It's not like I regret letting Applejack and her amazing shoulders get away from me, because she was the best thing that ever happened to me. Moving on from Applejack. You know, I experimented with what I thought Rarity, needed. I had, after all, had an explosive and self-destructive foray into mare-only relationships. And whilst Applejack might not have much interest in the rougher sex, I certainly did. I thought that maybe that was the solution for me. A handsome stallion, fashionable and elegant, some pony to match the up-and-coming fashionista Rarity. A perfect match, the kind of delightful romantic fantasy that honestly would have only been enthralled by a young filly about half my age, at the time reading some silly romance novel. That dip into the realm of fairy tale romance ended with a face full of cake and a ruined dress. Lesson learned. I liked that dress. I elevated my standards beyond princes and superficially to actual class. Fancy pants. The most desirable stallion in Canterlot, charming and witty, not to mention well connected within the realm of fashion and the elites of unicorn society. I was convinced that maybe he was the one for me. Gay, of course. He thought I knew. He also thought I was a stallion. Don't ask me how, but goodness, it was awkward. Possibly one of the worst conversations I've ever had in my entire life, barring that one time with Applejack. That other time with Rainbow Dash, and I suppose this one as well, which really has been a blow to my self-esteem in general. It was then that I found myself crushing hard on Rainbow Dash. I mean, realistically, could you blame me? She saved my life back when I was too busy making a foal of myself with those silly butterfly wings. And come on, let's be honest with ourselves. She may act the tomcolt, but she takes care of herself. The way she carefully engineers that mane to look unkempt in a strangely attractive and windswept way. The diligence she displays when tending to those feathers, those stomach muscles. What mare could resist that was even moderately bent? I certainly couldn't. For months I fawned over her, got her to wear an outrageous wig once. I took her measurements. They were all exemplary. The wingspan, the narrowness of that waistline, without being starved of calories. I could ramble for days about the various ways in which Rainbow Dash displays subtle beauty and an odd subversive feminine grace, but I was enthralled. But it wasn't just her appearance, darling. I figured the mare who saved my life would be the one for me. She saved my life so I could give her mine. I prepared a delightful speech for her, a confession of sorts. I spun my magic for weeks, no, months, trying to craft the perfect way to demonstrate my love for her. How silly it seems now. Oh, the ice cream I needed when, upon finally managing to corner her on a little date at the Sugar Cube corner, she revealed that she had been dating Applejack secretly for only a week at the time. I nearly choked on my cake. It was delicious cake too. Black Everfree chocolate. A thorough waste of cake and half a year's worth of waiting for Rainbow to notice me more than just that friend who does fashion. Oh, and she made it worse for me. All unintentionally. At no stage had she even come close to picking up my hints and feelings. Not only that, but she had the nerve to ask me for tips on how to date Applejack. The sheer fucking temerity. Yes, I'm aware she didn't know about my feelings for her at the time, but still. I didn't want to spoil her anything, but let's just say Applejack has a habit of stealing things I want. Well, stealing is a strong word. I obviously respect Applejack to a degree that cannot be described adequately within the boundaries of equestrian vocabulary, but fuck me! Could she just stop being so fucking attractive? Seriously, leave some for the rest of us. You were there for Thunderhoof, right? Anyway, refer to my previous statements. I won't delve too deep into that rabbit hole of nonsense. But by Celestia's 5th century yoke, fuck Applejack in her bizarrely sexy ways. What is it with those hips? Those shoulders? How are shoulders appealing? They don't even do anything on the romantic front. They just sort of serve as an attachment for forelegs, which definitely do things. But the way shoulders work, oh my, I'm getting sweaty thinking about it. I know Rainbow does. She told me in explicit detail. You mean you've never stared at Applejack's shoulders? You're in for an experience, believe me. It's like watching tectonic plates move mountains much faster, and also you don't have to be into geology to enjoy it. What do you mean, how do I feel about Spike? He's delightful, I guess. Anyway, I was talking about my romantic problems, and you were listening. Please don't interrupt. I'm in the middle of a deluge of personal grievances here. I took some time to calm down. I stepped back, focused on my work. I was professional for about 5 minutes. It was in that context that maybe I became a little too attracted to Fluttershy. She modelled for me. She is a mare with a particularly unique figure. I can't help myself for being an appreciator of art. Can I, darling? I described Rainbow Dash's unconventional attractiveness, but do I really need to go over Fluttershy? Anyway, she's straight. Funny how the chips fall. Or is it fries? I'll be honest with you, darling, I never did understand that saying. My point is, what a reversal from Fancy Pants. I sure can pick 'em. As Applejack would probably say whilst banging Rainbow Dash, which I should note Rainbow Dash also described. I'm not bitter, I'm just livid. Anyway, I'm not expecting you to understand why, after all this, after this endless habit of falling for mares and stones that I can't have, I managed to engineer my way into falling for Pinkie Pie. It took effort, I'll admit, a great deal of planning and mental gymnastics. I didn't even get along with Pinkie that well, frankly. I think she's high maintenance. And yes, I know that's rich coming from me. There was just something infectious about that enthusiasm, about the way she moved and talked several tempos too fast, about the way she put several spoonfuls worth of too much sugar into everything, including how she behaved with other ponies. Yes, it irritated me. Yes, I wish she'd just calm down, be quiet for the sun's sake. But whenever we were together, as friends with benefits, whatever it was we had, well, it was like having love injected directly into my veins. It's over now, of course. Excuse me, I need more ice cream. Of course, I'm happy she's married to Cheese now. I don't know what I want. Anything, I suppose. I thought that maybe she was the one, that the sort of energy she had would undo my curse. Oh, you look at me like I'm insane. I'm a unicorn. We're all about magic. You know this. Why wouldn't it make sense that I have some kind of anti-relationship curse on me? A sort of no-sex field. It feels that way. Let me put it to you straight. I have this magic trick I can pull off whenever I come close to being in a relationship. Any us I can make disappear, poof, as if it never existed. Applejack and me, gone. The possibility of a stable relationship with a stallion? Either I get caked or they're gay. Either way, it doesn't work out. Rarity is a lone wolf, a lonely soul, a whisper on the wind, a solitary note in a song of duplets. I'm a me. I'm just me. Rarity stands alone, forever, quite possibly. Pass me the wine, will you, Twilight? Thank you. Oh, you'll probably want some too, I assume. Naturally. Hang on, let me get you a glass. Anyway, where was I? Yes, it's like an actual curse. You'd think out of all my closest friends and several other ponies with like-minded interests, I have found at least one that was willing to maybe do more than enjoy a little slap and tickle between friends. No, I've never had a real relationship since Applejack, and yes, I'm aware she's probably going to be proposing to Rainbow soon. Rainbow told me. Don't ask me how she knew, she did. I'm as confused as you, trust me. And I'm happy for them, I really am. Her and Rainbow are made for each other, beyond any and all doubt. No matter what I might say drunk, they're made for each other more than I belonged with either of them. I just wish some pony was happy for me. That's all. For me to be with any pony. I mean, after all this, I don't think there's any pony left for me to fall for. Except you, I suppose. I'm being silly again. I just can't imagine being with some pony and it not exploding in my face, or it being engineered from the start to make me feel miserable. I just get the ice cream ready and prepare for another salvo of heartbreak. It's a routine. It's just a thing Rarity does, I suppose. Whatever curse I have, I don't see it being broken anytime soon. What do you mean you know a thing or two about magic? Don't be cheeky with me. I'm in the middle of bearing my broken, battered soul to you and... Excuse me, is this a clever ploy to get me to stop rambling? I'll have you know I'm not so easily... Alright. Well, that definitely... Well, you've made your point. But honestly, surely you could pick any pony. You're a princess. There's not a pony in Equestria that wouldn't... I mean, you could pick some pony who has, well, even a 1% viability when it comes to romantic relationships. I think I've displayed my capacity for destroying any potential relationship I could form. You make a valid argument. We'll see what happens. Perhaps this time I won't just be, well, me, on my own forever. Ha!
Please go to Straight to the Point Studios YouTube channel for part 1 of this story. A Bottle of Red by A Fanatic Rabbit. Twilight had expected far more. More arguments, more shouting, calls to order after crowds of ponies all tried to make their cases, to argue for the couple. She wasn't sure if she liked the calm and quiet ceremony more. The judge presiding over the affair had let the couple use a small conference room instead of one of the bigger courtrooms, and Twilight's aide and guards kept the press and public out. She wasn't exactly happy knowing that keeping the world away from this would bite her in the flank later. Twilight sat opposite to Rarity. She stared at her perfect white coat and perfect mane at odds with the tired circles under her eyes. Twilight knew she looked similar, maybe a touch more frazzled. Rarity looked to the judge who sat at the end of the table. The mayor looked similar to an aide Twilight inherited from Celestia, with an off-white coat and thick dark mane tied back into a bun. Twilight wasn't sure if they were related, but the somewhat familiar face smoothed over some of the aches and tension in her chest. They didn't go away completely. She still found it difficult to breathe. "Everything looks to be in order," said the judge, her voice clipped and professional. "Both parties have agreed to a fair level of financial recompense. Rarity, Seek, will regain a percentage of the former couple's collective funds in line with her earnings from the businesses." Twilight barely paid attention. She knew everything in the forms and declarations by heart, even if she wasn't so obsessive, a trait she had actually taken pride in over the years. She would have remembered most of it. Rarity would keep her properties. Any finances they pulled would be split to reflect her earnings. Any other possessions they owned were already divided between them, aside from any furniture. Technically, half of that wasn't either of theirs, being part of the palace's decor for generations. Rarity's face gradually turned to a frown, and she turned away from the judge as she spoke. Down to the desk in front of her, Twilight continued staring, longing to reach out, to brush her mane aside and touch her cheek. Citing lack of trust between both parties and unfulfilled promises, the imagined reconciliation was broken by Rarity's glower when she looked up. Twilight, the girl who ruled a nation, stared down gods, who ascended to near divinity herself, shrank back in her seat. Something twitched in Rarity's lips, and her expression softened a moment later. It very much didn't feel fair to Twilight to think a small seed of doubt turned into paranoia and fretting over who she was to the love of her life. But to Rarity, it was all a slap in the face, spitting on all she sacrificed.
With both parties officially parting, the judge finished off, then looked up. She glanced between Twilight and Rarity. With a small cough, she asked, "Are there any questions or objections to any of what I've covered?" Twilight inhaled, but Rarity answered first. "None at all, Your Honour." Twilight swallowed down her words and nodded. "None, Your Honour," she answered. "Very well," said the judge. "Then I officially declare you separated. You'll receive the written copies of the declaration soon enough, though I suspect it won't be entirely necessary." She trailed off and smiled thinly at the former spouses. She tucked her paperwork into a binder and hooked that under one of her forelegs. "Your Majesty, Mrs. Rarity," she said, bowing to one and nodding to the other. Then she vacated the room. Twilight continued to stare at Rarity, who now stared back. Her mouth felt like cotton, and her tongue stuck to her lips as she licked them. Her voice caught in her throat as she tried to talk, and all she managed was a quiet, an unregally squeaky, "I'm sorry." Rarity sighed and broke the stare. "You don't need to apologise," was all she said before she stood up and left the room, leaving Twilight truly alone. "Announcing the arrival of Her Majesty Princess Twilight," declared the magically enhanced booming voice of the usher. It carried over the guests in the extravagantly decorated ballroom, and many of them turned their heads as Twilight entered through the tall double doors. A pair of royal guards flanked her entrance. She didn't quite fit her dress anymore. Her legs were too long, her barrel too broad, and her wings strained some of the stitching in the sparkling teal outfit. Some of the seams had popped only a few hours before, but she managed to fix it after some panicking. It was patchy, but it was just about hidden and hopefully would go unnoticed. A lot of the heads turned back to each other, and the conspiratorial mutterings of a high-class party began again. They probably noticed the hasty fixes and the age of the dress. Twilight swallowed, put on her best royal smile, and strode through the ballroom with purpose. That purpose was punch, or some of the hors d'oeuvres. Maybe she could find some professors from the city academies to chat up. A well-dressed waiter crossed her path with tall flutes filled with something very bubbly. Without pause, Twilight delicately snatched one of the drinks in her magic and downed it in one swift motion. Now no one would question why her breath smelled of alcohol, though the strong scent of wine might stand out as odd. She deposited the empty glass onto another passing waiter's tray and grabbed a fresh glass, this one managing to survive not being guzzled down in seconds. Instead, she sipped at it and actually registered the sweet, acidic taste. Twilight suppressed a grimace and decided she still hadn't acquired to the taste, but appearances were important. It didn't take her long to find a group of ponies to talk to. Socialites and those with lofty aims all flocked to talk to her, and tonight was no different. She made small talk, commenting on the weather. The Weather Patrol did a wonderful job tonight, didn't they? Foreign politics. I did hear about that skirmish on the Wingardian border. It's a tragedy, really. And taking part in so many other inconsequential topics and discussions. The audience she accrued flowed and changed with the subject of conversation, and she barely noticed the myriad of different faces that went by. When she did, she faintly recognized them all. Some she even recalled the names of, but they all blurred together. The fuzz of the night came to a very sudden halt when a particular set of gleaming blue eyes appeared through the crowd. The clockwork of motions of nodding and sipping, one after the other, clashed, and Twilight dribbled a splash of champagne down her chin and onto the floor as she caught Rarity's gaze. Blinking, Twilight stole a handkerchief from one of the nearby stallions to dab at her chin and the front of her dress. She ignored the delightful squeal she made when she tossed it over her shoulder and pushed her way into another circle of conversation. There was a brief grumble and muttering from her new immediate neighbours, but recognition of who she was stole away their protests. "Rarity?" she asked, interrupting the conversation. Every pony around her went quiet, turning their attention to Twilight. She cleared her throat and straightened herself up, ignoring the warmth growing in her cheeks. Rarity, immaculately dressed, raised her eyebrows and scooted back a step. She tugged on something, and that's when Twilight noticed a hoof was wrapped around a stallion's leg. He blinked from behind a pair of broad lens glasses and glanced back to Rarity. She seemed to loosen her grip and took another half step back before he spoke. "Ah, you two are acquainted?" he asked with a sly smirk. Rarity stopped where she stood and straightened up. A little twitch of her eyes and lips briefly caught Twilight's attention. She was suppressing a pout meant for him, Twilight was sure. "Yes," Twilight answered. "We were, She trailed off, looking back at Rarity. "You know, we used to be married, Mint," Rarity said in Twilight's silence. The stallion chuckled and nodded. Yes, who could forget you were the princess consort?" Rarity stiffened up, then gave her head a little shake. In the process, she replaced the tiny hint of a frown she wore with a tight, perfect smile. It didn't quite reach her eyes. "Twilight, darling," she said, and Twilight's legs tingled. "I wasn't expecting you here. How have you been?" Twilight thought the surprise a little odd, but she didn't push the issue. Her mouth felt like cotton, and she licked her lips while entirely forgetting her drink. "I've been good," she answered, fighting to keep her voice level. "What about you? How have you been? How are your businesses?" Twilight wanted to curse at herself. Rarity licked her lips now, and there was a subtle shift in her jaw, a hint at a remark that she choked back. Twilight now noticed the bags under her eyes, having barely changed since last they met. "I've been good," Rarity said back. "Business has been a little underwhelming this past season or two, but I'm keeping afloat. It is what it is, I suppose." She then looked to the stallion. "Mint, you didn't say Twilight would be here?" Her voice was much flatter, letting the annoyance ring through. "Why wouldn't you know I would be here?" Twilight asked before she could answer. "I thought everyone invited knew I was coming." Mint chuckled again and gestured to Rarity. "Ah, she was my +1, he explained, and Twilight winced as she realized Rarity wasn't invited by the host directly. "Speaking of, did you bring anyone with you?" Twilight swallowed, glancing back to Rarity. "No," she said truthfully. "I came alone, or as alone as I can anyway," she added, referencing her guards. She glanced over her shoulder for a brief moment and spotted one set of gleaming gold armor at the edge of the room. "What a shame," said Mint. "I was hoping to see who you'd bring tonight. It's a pity, but I suppose we can't expect everyone to move on so quickly." Rarity shot him a brief scowl, which he either ignored or didn't notice in the first place. "I'll leave you two to catch up and grab my dear Rarity a quick drink, shall I?" Twilight clenched her jaw as she smirked at her before turning to chase down a passing waiter. "So," Twilight started, shifting her gaze back to Rarity. "He's your date?" "Not after tonight he isn't," Rarity replied snappishly. "Sorry." Rarity sighed. "You have nothing to apologize for. He's just an ass." The rest of the circle around Rarity and Twilight glanced at each other and began muttering. Rarity smiled with amusement, and this time it did reach her eyes. Twilight relaxed and gestured with her head to one side of the ballroom. Rarity's expression sobered, but she nodded and let Twilight lead the way. They moved through the throng of ponies and eventually exited through a large set of doors to the balcony. Fewer ponies were out here. The frost that built up in the air before Twilight's nose gave her the reason why. It gave the two of them enough privacy, Twilight decided. "I can't believe you still have that old thing," Rarity said, her voice pitched lower now that they were away from the bulk of the noise. "It barely fits on you, and..." She glanced over to Twilight's side. "It looks like you fixed it yourself. No offense." "That's because I did," said Twilight. "Some taken." Not that Twilight expected her sewing to compare to Rarity's hoofwork. Rarity nodded. "Well, I certainly hope the rest of your wardrobe fits better." The two stood in silence for a few moments. Rarity looked over the edge of the balcony, and Twilight followed her gaze to the glittering streets of Canterlot below. Twilight imagined the vibrant nightlife of other upper-class parties, of the clubs towards the outer edges of the city. She wondered if there was any pony else that felt as awkward as she did right now. "How are the others?" Twilight asked, breaking the silence. Rarity huffed. "You could always ask them yourself." Twilight frowned, and she hoped the night hit it. "Rarity, that's not..." "They all wonder what's happened to you, you know," Rarity continued, talking over Twilight. "You used to visit regularly and invite the rest of them over. Now they're half convinced you forgot Ponyville even exists at all." Silence followed, and Twilight shivered as much from the cool night air as the icy fire emanating from the mare beside her. "I'm sorry," she said. "At least that is actually your fault," Rarity said bitterly, "and yet it feels like they're judging me some of the time. Rainbow Dash especially. She thinks I gave up on you because I was being selfish." She harumphed. "Selfish, me of all ponies." Twilight couldn't think of anything to say. She swallowed and muttered, "I'm sorry." "And my businesses? I had to take out a new mortgage on the Carousel Boutique to keep things afloat. Fewer ponies buy from me or commission me since our..." Rarity shook her head. "The ex-royal consort doesn't really have the same allure to it. I thought it would make me feel more gratified in my work, but this is undue judgment." Twilight looked up at the crescent moon in the sky, on the path she had set for it earlier that evening. "I'm sorry," she said again, her voice creaking, and she turned back to Rarity. "Oh, will you stop bloody apologising?" Rarity snapped. "Half of everything out of your mouth has been..." Rarity was shut up as Twilight leaned in and kissed her. With her eyes closed tight, she couldn't see the unicorn's reaction. But after a few moments, Rarity shoved at Twilight's shoulder and broke the kiss. Twilight, cheeks flushed and guilt in her heart, leaned back. Rarity stared up at her, and a range of expressions crossed her face. Her brow knitted in anger, her own cheeks red, visible through her pale coat, and her mouth slack and open. Twilight prepared for the lashing she just interrupted to resume with vigour, and was surprised when Rarity spoke. "You've been drinking," was all she said. Twilight blinked and glanced inside. She spotted Mint with 2 drinks held aloft in a silvery glow, looking lost. "It is a party," she explained flatly. "I can taste the wine we were saving for our 10th, Twilight." Rarity settled on an expression that Twilight read as judgmental. "That technically wasn't yours to open." Twilight bit her lip and looked back to Rarity. "Sorry." Rarity puffed up, then she shut her eyes tight. She brought her hoof to her chest, breathed in deeply, and exhaled deeply. Nothing to worry about, she said, opening her eyes. If I had it, I'd have drunk it months ago. Twilight smirked for a moment. I still have some left, she said. I can give you the rest. It is both of ours, after all. Rarity snorted. I'm not so sure I want to set hoof in the palace. Twilight shied back. I looked back over Canterlot and beyond it. She squinted, trying to pick out the lights of a small town on the horizon. I should visit to Ponyville again. Between the light pollution and difference in terrain, she couldn't spot the town from where she stood. I'm just scared of what I'll feel when I get there, of how the others might react. Rarity blinked. Oh, Twilight, darling. I don't blame you for that, Twilight said back. It is because of you, sure, but it's not your fault, it's mine. She looked toward Rarity again, her breath caught in her throat as she took in the soft frown on Rarity's face, the lines in her forehead. She kept herself from laughing at a comment Rarity made about worry lines in the past. Can we try again? Try what again? Rarity said. If you mean our marriage, I think we're a little late for that. Twilight shook her head. Just being friends, Twilight responded. I want you back in my life, and the others too. It doesn't need to be more than that. Rarity thought for a few moments, then nodded. I think we can do that, she smiled, and the icy air around Twilight felt a little warmer. A Darling Little Secret by Gusto Starstorm. It had initially been a simple trip to Canterlot, meant to stock up on some niche accoutrements for her own Nightmare Night costume. In previous years she had been swamped with orders, as every pony in Ponyville needed a costume. Rarity was often working herself so hard that she rarely partook in the festivities. This year, however, she was ahead of schedule, in part because none of her friends had put in orders. To be fair, one had said they would, but that did not come to fruition. After last year's Nightmare Night was over, the daredevil among them had realised she'd gotten a hole in her Shadow Bolt costume. Naturally, Rarity had offered to patch it up, and even offered to make it better for next year. At the time, Rainbow Dash had seemed so enthusiastic about it. Yet here it was, 1 year later with only a week before Nightmare Night, and she had been nowhere to be found around Ponyville. Nobody had seen Rainbow Dash at all outside of her work hours. Unusually for her, she seemed to be keeping to herself lately, and no pony knew why. Thus, as Rarity made her own way down Restaurant Row, what she thought she had seen had stopped her dead in her tracks. Sitting there, at a cafe with some of Twilight's old Canterlot friends, was a cyan pony with rainbow-coloured hair. But there was something so off about this scene that Rarity found herself doing a double take. Unfortunately, during said double take, she was spotted. "Oh, Rarity!" Minuet called out, waving to the alabaster unicorn. "What are you doing here?" "Greetings, Minuet," Rarity said, trotting over to the table. "Forgive me for staring, darling. I thought I saw some pony I knew." "It's alright," Lemon Hearts told her before sipping her tea. "We were just hanging out with our new friend, Rainbow Gleam." Rainbow Gleam? Taking a cursory glance to her left, Rarity saw the eerily familiar pony. However, upon closer inspection, the differences quickly became clearer. For starters, before her sat an earth pony, lacking the wings of her dear friend and possessing a different cutie mark. Her mane as well was far more well kept, and almost reminded Rarity of her own in a way. Various shades of pink, orange, yellow, green and blue coming together to form a simply heavenly look. This was a pony who took care of herself, and Rarity could see that. Still though, something about those magenta eyes. "Hello there, darling," the pony known as Rainbow Gleam finally said,
It is nice to meet you. A small smile graced Rarity's face. Rainbow Gleam certainly seemed polite. Charmed, the unicorn said. Are you new in town? I fear I've never seen you around Canterlot before. I am indeed. The last few weeks have been utterly dreadful for me, so I have been looking for a change of scenery. Rainbow Gleam took a sip of her tea, then gestured to Minuet. Luckily for me, I met this lovely darling who took a liking to me immediately. We've been meeting up for tea every day for the past week. Speaking of, Twinkle-Shine interjected, do you want to join us, Rarity? We've got an open spot. Moon Dancer had to dip out early, unfortunately. The fashionista nodded. I think I can make a moment, girls. This would be a good chance to let me know how far your costumes are coming anyhow. How darling of you! Rainbow Gleam cheered. You're a costume designer. Fashion in general, Rarity corrected. But around Nightmare Night, I'll usually take up the challenge of designing costumes for every pony. It's a rather lovely change of pace. Sounds like it. I do appreciate a well-crafted design myself. Rarity let out a small giggle of delight. From the little they have talked, Rainbow Gleam seemed like some pony she would get along with well. It would be nice to spend some time with another pony who appreciated fashion like she did. And yet, when their eyes met again, something still seemed off. That familiar magenta seemed to be toying with Rarity far too much. Something wrong, darling? Asked Rainbow Gleam. Well, forgive my asking this out of nowhere, but you wouldn't happen to have a relative named Rainbow Dash, would you? Pegasus? Has a similarly multicoloured mane? Gleam's initial reaction was shock. That much Rarity could tell. But then, an eager Minuet only added to the issue. Oh hey, you're right, the blue unicorn exclaimed. They do kinda look alike, don't they? Yeah, but the way they act is night and day, Lemon Heart said idly. No offence to Rainbow Dash, of course. She's very cool and all. I just don't see her hanging out somewhere like this, you know? The clear discomfort on Rainbow Gleam's face made Rarity wince. If she were to wager, this was a bit of a touchy subject to the Earth Pony. A theory began to crystallise in her mind, but instead of voicing it, she decided to take a different angle. Well, never mind that, dear, Rarity said out of nowhere. Silly me and my little notions. Tell you what, Rainbow Gleam, if you like, you could join me on getting some supplies. I'll need to get back to Ponyville soon to finish the girls' costumes. Oh, yes, I would love to, darling, Rainbow Gleam said, a nervous smile visible. Forgive me, girls, not that this hasn't been fun, but I think I will join Rarity on a little shopping spree. Well, alright, Minuet answered, offering the warmest smile she could muster. I hope you'll think about joining us though. Nightmare Night in Ponyville is so much fun. I will consider it. For now, though, I shall bid you adieu. And without another word, the two fashion-savvy ponies left, heading away from Restaurant Row. However, during the walk back, something kept bugging Rarity, and one look at Rainbow Gleam only furthered that feeling. She had to say something. Rainbow Gleam, I am so sorry for putting you on the spot there. I didn't mean to upset you like I clearly did. For a bit, Gleam did not answer, her downtrodden expression saying it all. Rarity had clearly hit a sore subject, and that certainly did make the walk a bit awkward. And yet, she still couldn't help but theorise. Had Gleam and Dash had a falling out in the past? Well, it was none of her business, she reasoned. If Gleam wanted to tell her, then she would tell her. Rarity, darling, Gleam eventually spoke up. You were curious if I had a cousin named Rainbow Dash, right? The unicorn nodded, and Rainbow Gleam took a deep breath in. She looked Rarity in the eyes and smiled. The next thing that came out of Gleam's mouth, though, shocked Rarity to her core. It's that convincing, huh? She said, losing the accent and sounding slightly raspier than before. Remind me to thank Twilight later, will ya? Stunned silence was Rarity's only answer. You're not about to freak out on me, are you, Rare? Without a single word, Rarity's eyes practically bored into her friend from how utterly flabbergasted she was. The silence was getting to be too much, and Rainbow Gleam winced worriedly. Rarity, please, if you're going to scream, could you not? I don't want to cause a scene in the middle of town. That seemed to get the fashionista's attention, as she blinked a couple of times before shaking her head, taking in a deep breath to try to steady her nerves. Rarity quietly said the first thing that came to mind. Is that really you, Rainbow Dash? The pony in question giggled, whispering in kind. Pretty good disguise, right? Twilight made a little spell for me, though I did style my mane myself. How'd you like it? Well, it's quite fetching indeed, Rarity admitted, but that's hardly the point. You're telling me Twilight has been transforming you into an earth pony so you can go to tea with Minuet and company here in Canterlot? Dash shrugged. I mean, I've been doing other stuff too, like I bought this really pretty dress yesterday. I should show it to you. I think you'll like it. Oh, and you're buying dresses too? Asked the unicorn incredulously. Why do you sound so upset, Rarity? I thought you'd be excited about this. Under normal circumstances, I would be. However, I feel I'm just a tad confused about this whole thing. I've never known you to be so much like you. Silence fell between them for a few seconds, but Rainbow Dash didn't let it last long. Rarity, have you ever felt like you're not so good at showing ponies every part of you? That got the unicorn's undivided attention. Whatever do you mean, darling? Well, Rainbow looked away, lightly sighing before she continued. I know what other ponies think of me. Everyone sees Rainbow Dash and thinks sporty, daring, rough and tumble, right? And don't get me wrong, I totally get it. I'm awesome. It's not like that's a front or nothing. I just kind of wish I was better at expressing this other part of me. The girl who sometimes likes a good dress, who'd love to have tea and talk with a little more, poshness, I guess. The word you're looking for is class, Rarity interjected, but I believe I do understand what you're saying. Well, anyway, I went to Twilight and she gave me a little spell to help me do that. I've been having so much fun with it that I've been using it pretty much every chance I got. The two made their way to a small fountain. Rarity sat down by it, deep in contemplation. In the span of only a few minutes, she had gotten the answers to several questions she'd initially had, and a few she didn't even realize she wanted to ask, as well as a small, unanswered one, which she voiced immediately. Why the name Rainbow Gleam, if you don't mind me asking? Well, other than wanting to keep a part of myself while doing this, the disguised Pegasus propped her head up proudly. It's a little something Try taught me about espionage. It wasn't enough for me to look different or have a different name, I had to act differently too. So I tried to act like... Me? Rarity asked, a knowing grin on her face. Even copied one of my verbal tics, it seemed. Hey, cut me some slack. It was either that or dashing, and I thought that would have been too obvious. The mares shared a laugh at that, before falling back to their thoughts. In this new silence, Rarity continued to contemplate the situation, now that she'd had a chance to digest the new information. So, Rainbow Dash had a secret, and Twilight was in on it. The mare liked fashion, at least to some degree, and enjoyed acting like a refined lady from time to time. All of what they knew of Rainbow Dash was true. She was still the brave and daring stunt flyer every pony loved, but she was also this pony. And yet, Rainbow felt the need to disguise herself and travel to Canterlot in order to express this. She didn't feel comfortable doing so back in Ponyville. Rarity's heart went out to a friend, thinking about that. It could be difficult to go against others' perceptions of oneself, and it seemed Rainbow sometimes wanted to go far against Pony's view of her. Rarity wanted to help. She had to help. Rainbow Dash, have you ever considered doing this in Ponyville? A couple of times, yeah, Dash answered. Why? Well, I just had a thought, dear. What if you went as this side of yourself for Nightmare Night? Looking up, Rarity could see the shock in her friend's eyes, but from experience, she could tell it was not the bad kind of shock. This was simply being blindsided by a question. But it was clear that the Pegasus was considering it. Well, I mean, do you think I could get away with that? Asked Rainbow Dash, her voice tinged with, if it were any other pony, Rarity would have thought it to be trepidation. I mean, I know every pony dresses up on Nightmare Night, but I bet it'd be a shock for all our friends. Let them be shocked then. It's all in good fun, is it not? Rainbow Dash looked to the ground, clearly deep in thought. Then after a few seconds, she turned her head slightly and put on an easygoing smile. I will need to dress for such a lovely occasion, Dash said, slipping back into her alter ego. Would you be willing to make me one, Rarity, darling? To that, Rarity smiled. I would be honoured to, Rainbow Gleam. This was it, the big night. As Rarity made her way out to the festival, she took great care in her steps so as to keep her blue pinstripe suit pristine. She looked into the reflection of a nearby window, adjusting her mask for the final time before finally heading out. This would be her first Nightmare Night in a while, and the unicorn intended to have a good time. As she reached the facilities, her eyes wandered, eagerly searching the crowds for a certain Pegasus. But try as she may, Rarity could not find Rainbow Dash. Unfortunate too, as the two of them had worked very closely to finish her costume on time. She was quite eager to see the reactions from every pony. Oh, it's fine, Rarity reminded herself. She probably just got caught up in making sure her hair was perfect. She will be here, I hope. A small twinge of dread formed in the pit of Rarity's stomach at the prospect of Rainbow Dash not going through with it. Of course, it was her friend's call in the end, but still. Nightmare Night was supposed to be a time of delight after all, and Rarity wanted nothing more than for her friends to be delighted. Rarity! Turning around so fast as to risk whiplash, the unicorn's excitement was slightly dashed upon seeing it wasn't her rainbow-haired friend. Only slightly, however, as instead she was greeted by four similarly familiar faces. Ah, Minuet! Exclaimed Rarity. Lemon Hearts, Twinkle Shine, and you must be Moon Dancer, correct? The bespectacled unicorn nodded, adjusting her glasses. It's nice to finally meet some of Twilight's other friends. You're Rarity, right? Indeed I am. And if you're looking to meet Twilight's friends, you shan't be disappointed, dear. Why, even her friend Sunset Shimmer is making the trip to be here. Oh, I remember her, said Twinkle Shine. And she's friends with Twilight, huh? Sounds like she's changed for the better. Hopefully she'll like our get-up. Hey, yeah, Minuet exclaimed, pulling out her fencing foil by magic. Thanks again, Rarity. These three Buccaneers get-up are the best costumes we could have ever gone with. I wish you would have joined us, Moony, Lemonheart said. There was a fourth Buccaneer after all. Yeah, well, I didn't want to force you guys to spend money on me, Moondancer admitted, looking away in embarrassment. This is my first Nightmare Night in years. Oh, we wouldn't have minded, Minuet insisted, but we do like your costume all the same. Rarity nodded. It is quite the fetching librarian costume, my dear. Upon hearing that, Moondancer looked as though she'd just been insulted. Librarian? Ah! No, it's not a librarian, it's A.K. Yearling, darling, author of the Daring Do books. The five unicorns all froze at hearing this new voice, but for very different reasons. Rarity was the first to turn her attention to the newcomer, hoping that her instinct was, in fact, correct. And sure enough, it was. Sauntering over to the party was every pony's favourite Pegasus, Rainbow Dash, grabbing the attention of those she had passed with her outfit. Though, not that Rarity could blame them. Tonight, her friend looked like a completely different pony. One with her mane brushed and styled to the side, wearing a deep blue sequin dress and a beautiful necklace embedded with a single emerald. And Rarity couldn't keep the smile off her face as she saw her. "Oh, silly me," Rarity said. "How could I forget the author of my dear friend's favourite books?" "All is forgiven," Rainbow Dash told her. "It's quite a lovely little get-up, darling." Moon Dancer looked away, flustered by the compliment. Well, thanks. It was kind of a last-minute thing. I couldn't even remember the spell to get my glasses the right shade of red." "Oh, pish posh," Rainbow Dash answered, ignoring the shocked expressions of the other 3 unicorns. "Moon Dancer, was it? Regardless of the little details, you look utterly dashing. And if you've gone through the effort of dressing like her, am I right to guess you're a fan as well?" "I am, yeah," Moon Dancer told her. "I didn't think you would be as well. No offense." "None taken, darling. Though why would I be offended by that?" Well, I mean, I've heard a lot about you from Twilight and the girls, and..." Moon Dancer didn't get to finish the thought, as a light giggle came from Rainbow Dash. "Trust me when I say this, there's far more to every pony than what she shows every pony else." "Yeah, I suppose there would be." Throughout this whole exchange, Rarity had been sparing passing glances at the 3 buccaneers, checking them for their reaction. But as that line hung in the air, there was a change. First it was Twinkleshine, eyes going a bit wider, followed by Lemonheart, who raised her hoof to her chin in deep contemplation. And last, but certainly not least, was Minuet. That knowing grin on her face said it all. "Well, regardless," Rainbow Dash continued, "it's wonderful to meet another pony with good taste, and since I've not seen your face around here, am I right to assume this is your first Nightmare Night in Ponyville?" Moon Dancer nodded. "Well, you're in luck, Moon Dancer," exclaimed Rainbow. "Rarity and I know where all the best booths at the festival are. Stick with us and we'll ensure you have a darling night." "Aha!" All eyes turned to Minuet, who looked as though she'd just uncovered some great secret. In typical Minuet fashion, she bounced forward, meeting the Pegasus's face, and before Rainbow Dash could get a word in edgewise, she found herself wrapped up in a warm embrace. "You did decide to join us after all, huh?" Rainbow Dash smiled. "Suppose the jig is up then. It's delightful to see you all again." "Right back at you, Rainbow Gleam," Lemonheart said knowingly. "Definitely explains the vague feeling of unicorn magic around you." Though definitely still happy, that line sent a twinge of guilt through Rainbow Dash. Looking to the ground, she took in a deep breath, contemplating what to say. Eventually though, she just spoke her mind. "Listen girls," she told them, dropping the accent. "I'm real sorry about lying to you. It's just I'm not really good at sharing this side of myself with others. Tonight's the first time I've done it in Ponyville, and even then, it's Nightmare Night. It's just a costume to every pony else. Then we'll show everyone else this other side of you together." Moon Dancer's confidence caught every pony's attention, Rainbow Dash especially. The determined glint in her bespectacled eyes could have cut through diamond. "Rainbow Dash, I sympathise," she said, a soft smile on her face. "I know how hard it can be to put yourself out there. I did it once, and when it didn't go exactly how I wanted, I retreated inward. I regret that now, but it's taught me a few things. I haven't known you very long, but I wanted to help you with this, and I know the girls feel the same. This is a first for both of us, so let's make this Nightmare Night the best one we can."
Silence was Rainbow Dash's only answer initially, but after a few seconds, as if letting the idea hang in the air, the Pegasus met her new friend's smile with one of her own. "Sounds wonderful, darling," she answered, slipping back into a gleam side. "I think I shall take you up on that offer. After all, Nightmare Night is always more fun with friends." "I concur," Rarity chimed in. "Now, what do you say we go find the others? Probably easiest to start off with our friends, then work our way up to those outside the group." "Good plan, Rarity," said Minuet. "Oh, let's start with Twilight then. I don't know about you, but I'd like to meet Sunset Shimmer again. It's been years." "You go ahead then. Rainbow Dash and I will catch up." Taking that advice, the Unicorn Quartet headed towards the festivities. When they were out of earshot, Rarity and Rainbow Dash shared a contented sigh. "Thanks again for doing this for me, Rare," Dash said. "I'm so glad I went through with this." "As am I. For a second, I was worried you might back out." I'll admit, I did have to give myself a pep talk before I left the house. "Well, whatever got you to come, I'm so proud of you for doing this, darling." A small smile graced Rainbow's face as she and Rarity began heading in the direction of their other friends. Together, they would have a wonderful Nightmare Night, that much was for sure. The first step was taken, and there was no going back now. Not that either of them particularly wanted to go back. Though, Rainbow Dash did remember one thing she did want. "Before I forget," she said, "I've been meaning to ask, what exactly is your costume, Rarity?" The Alabaster Unicorn let out a small chuckle. "You remember that time I met Sunset Shimmer? Well, during that trip, she introduced me to something called Team Fortress 2.
Rarity Fights a Giant Crab by Shakespeare-Eccles. Rarity knew that a long train ride was almost always made shorter with the company of good ponies with whom to converse. As the train entered a dark tunnel, Rarity could see her reflection in the interior lights of the train car against the glass of the observation car. Her hoof adjusted the curls of her mane. "Rarity? Rarity, are you listening?" Sweetie Belle asked. Rarity's eyes refocused and looked at the reflection of her sister, behind her on the opposite side of the aisle. Rarity assured her, "Well, of course I'm listening, darling. I just wanted to make sure my mane looked its best for when we make our grand entrance into Baltimore." She flourished her curly violet locks. "This hair doesn't just happen when I roll out of bed in the morning, after all. Sometimes I feel like you care more about your mane than you do about me," Sweetie said. The train exited the tunnel and their reflections washed out in the bright light of the sun rising over Horseshoe Bay. Rarity blanched. "Sweetie Belle, don't say such things. You know you're the most important pony in my world. And I'm sorry if I've ever given you any reason to doubt that. That's what today's all about, after all, catching up on lost time. You've gotten older, and we've both been so busy with our adult lives. It's easy for the time to slip away from us, and that's why we're taking the time to do this. After all, if we do not ever take time, how can we ever have time?" Sweetie Belle gave a neutral huff. The train rolled into Baltimore Station, and they disembarked. "Now then," Rarity said, adjusting her sequin saddlebag, "where shall we go first?" Sweetie Belle pointed out the dot on her map nearest the train station. Let's look at the Historical Arms and Armour Museum. I need to do some research for our history lesson at school. Rarity did a double take. On first hearing her words, it sounded like her little sister was speaking as a student. But the young mare walking beside her wasn't a little filly anymore, and she was speaking as a teacher at Princess Twilight's School of Friendship. Rarity always believed that her sister was destined to be a famous singer with her beautiful voice. And while Sweetie had overcome her stage fright somewhat since her days as a blank flank, a career in the spotlight wasn't for her. Being the director of the school's glee club brought her all the joy she wanted, and at the end of the day, that was what mattered. But her primary duty was still that of a teacher for multiple subjects. What else have your students been learning about lately? Rarity asked with sincere interest as they walked across the city. We recently learned about the astrological science, Sweetie said with a titter in her voice. Astrology? Rarity balked. She found it inconceivable, or at the very least a bit unlikely, that the relative position of the planets and the stars could have a special, deep significance or meaning that exclusively applies to only you. Is fortune telling what passes for academia these days? Sweetie chuckled. No, not the horoscope stuff, the history of the signs. It's really quite a fascinating tale. Rarity smiled. Well, we have nothing but time today. Please. She insisted on hearing about it. Sweetie beamed. Singing may have been her talent, but it took her a long time to realise that helping ponies and imparting knowledge was her calling. And she was quite good at it. And her older sister could hear her tone of voice shift into teacher mode. Well, as the story goes, on the night that Nightmare Moon rebelled against Princess Celestia, she arranged the stars in the sky to depict the 12 great foes that she had defeated as the Princess of the Night, which we call constellations. Rarity knew perfectly well what star constellations were, but she wouldn't dare interrupt her sister in the middle of telling a story. Sweetie continued. When Princess Celestia defeated Nightmare Moon, the responsibility of raising the moon fell to her, but she either couldn't or wouldn't change her sister's stars. And so for 1,000 years, the night sky stayed unchanged as a homage to the great feats of Princess Luna. It was a boon for nautical explorers who could see the night sky to help navigate the seas to new worlds before the invention of the compass. Over the course of the year, the sun would rise in a different constellation, which, along with the moon phase cycles, became the basis for our 12-month calendar, and which sign you were born under became the basis for astrology and horoscopes. Rarity smiled with pride. That's quite the thorough explanation, Sweetie, she praised. She tapped a hoof to her chin in Fork's wonder, and then gave her another opportunity to show off her knowledge. So remind me, what are the 12 signs? Sweetie Belle tapped at the air in front of her, as though checking off an invisible checklist as she spoke. There's Aquarius, the water elemental. It's in the name, really. Aqua. Then there's Pisces, the fish. I guess it was a really big fish, like a shark, or maybe even a sea serpent. And I'm sure it was this big, Rarity said, extending her hooves out to either side of her as far as she could, mocking every fishing story she had ever heard. Sweetie shared a giggle with her. Next, there's also Sagittarius the Archer, Gemini the Twins, Virgo the Maiden, and Libra the Adjudicator. Adjudicator? Goodness, That's a spelling bee word if I've ever heard one, Rarity exclaimed. It means a judge, or a pony who makes decisions, Sweetie explained. And let's see, there's Aries the ram, Taurus the bull, Leo the lion, Capricorn the goat, and Scorpio the scorpion. Quite the menagerie Luna kept up there, Rarity said playfully, counting up everything in her head as they neared the museum. Though, I think that's only 11. Standing in the entrance queue, Rarity looked in the windows of the museum front, admiring the intersection of blacksmithing and tailoring. The seams of metal suits jingled as the ground trembled, likely from a passing trolley. Sweetie Belle gave it no notice. She was lost in thought as she double-checked her mental list. Her eyes lit up as she arrived at the answer. Oh yeah, there's the... Crab! A Baltimore citizen screamed as he galloped at full speed down the street, followed by several dozen more panicked ponies. Giant crab! Rarity looked in the direction from which the ponies were fleeing. Down the avenue between the rows of buildings, she could see the glittering blue of the water in Horseshoe Bay, and what looked to be a mountain rising out of it. The ground tremors grew stronger, coming in sets of 6 as the terrible beast came ashore in a thunderous scuttle. Each of its legs came down like a meteor, leaving craters in the paved cityscape. Its claws were the size of city buses, swinging like wrecking balls at the buildings with the misfortune of being in its path. The massive crustacean bore down on them as it made its way down the avenue. Rarity protectively grabbed her little sister's hoof and pulled her past the ticket kiosk into the museum. She shielded Sweetie's body with her own under a sturdy display table, hoping that it might save them from any falling debris. As the rumbles grew into earthquakes, a monstrous screech pierced the air and the building across the street was smashed. Stonework the size of a refrigerator crashed against the front of the museum, smashing the window and sending artifact displays scattered across the tiled floor amid stones, dust and broken glass. Sweetie Belle didn't want to look, but did so all the same. Terrified ponies in the streets ran for their very lives as a giant claw reached down to pluck them up by their manes, one by one. The other claw, razor sharp, reached over and cut their hair clean off, letting them fall several stories back to the hard ground. The lucky ones died on impact. Those less fortunate were left screaming in the pain of several broken bones and the slow death of internal injuries. Sweetie Belle tried to pull away from Rarity's grasp. We have to do something! No, no! Rarity cried, clutching her closer. We are just going to close our eyes, cover our ears, and wait here, ignoring it until it goes away. Rarity, look what's happening out there, Sweetie said. To some pony else! It's happening to some pony else! Sweetie Belle elbowed her cowering sister and pulled herself free. We're all some pony else to some pony else! Sweetie, the glass! Sweetie Belle put on a set of iron horseshoes and grabbed one of the swords from the floor. What are you going to do? What I can! Sweetie charged out of the store, gripping the sword in her magic, and swung it against the crab's leg with repeated metallic clangs. As though she were striking it against stone, a giant claw moved with unnatural speed, grabbing the pony by her mane. She shrieked as she was lifted up into the air and carried away by the thunder of giant, chitinous legs. Rarity hoped in vain that Sweetie could escape, break free and survive the landing. Somehow, she seethed with anger under the table, angry at the crab attacking the city and taking her sister, angry at whoever could have saved them, but didn't. Angry at Sweetie Belle for being so reckless, but mostly, Rarity was angry at herself for doing nothing in her cowardice. The crunching sound of glass under horseshoes approached Rarity. An aura of blue magic removed the table covering her. She looked at the pony standing before her. "Princess Luna!" Rarity exclaimed. "Please, you have to do something. You have to stop that beast." Luna shook her head. "I cannot, as it is not my fight." But you've beaten it before. The legends of the astrological signs." "If that were true, if I had defeated it before, you would not now be asking me to defeat it. When I made its constellation, I gave it one of my brightest stars as a reminder of the strength of such a foe. But as such, it was one of the first stars to appear in the evening, garnering the wishes of many ponies." "It's more gin than crab," Luna explained. "For such a creature, wishes are power, but for the ponies making the wishes, it is simply that, wishful thinking. But the creature does have one weak spot." Luna tapped the bridge of her nose, right between the eyes. "Some pony must be able to do something!" Rarity cried. "Some pony else, yes?" Luna asked pointedly. She took an ornate sword from the floor and held it. It glittered with silver, inlaid stars and embedded gems. Her magic held it by the blade as she inspected it and then pointed the handle at Rarity. You look like some pony else to me." But why me?" Rarity asked. "Because," Luna explained, "you must understand, as I once failed to, that this is not a monster that is defeated by destroying what we hate, but by saving that which we love. It shines brightest in the dark. It is there but cannot be seen. To have it costs you nothing. To be without it costs you everything." Sweetie Belle's screams pierced the air. Before she even realized it, Rarity had taken the sword from Luna and gave chase to her sister's abductor. Though it had a much larger gait, accompanying its massive size, out of the water, the crab lumbered along slowly through the city. Rarity was able to catch up in very little time. "I say now, you brute! Unhand her!" Rarity shouted, striking one of its legs with her sword. The blade reverberated in her magical grasp as she swung it against the steel girder. "Unclaw her!" Rarity yelled again, trying to move ahead of its path. "Let her go!" Sweetie Belle shrieked as she continued to flail at her captor's grip on her. The giant crab's claw held her suspended nearly 3 stories in the air by her mane as it carried her. But Rarity had not chosen her words poorly. Her magic was ready to catch her if she was to fall. She swung again at another leg, only to be repelled once more by the impervious chitin armor. But she did manage to get its attention. It turned and brought its leg up to stomp it back down at her. The leg's jab was fast, but Rarity was faster, diving out of the way as the tip made an enormous pothole in the road, scattering broken cobblestones. While all unicorns had magic, it was of varying strengths and disciplines. For some, it was alchemy or botany, or something elemental based like water. In Rarity's case, she had honed a fine dexterity to suit her talent as a seamstress, but her special magical talent was her ability to find and manipulate crystals and minerals. In another life, she could have been an adept geomancer. Her eyes scanned the cobblestone road the giant crab was straddling. It was like one big claymore. Rarity's magic grabbed as many of the road stones as she could manage and wrenched them from their setting, flinging them upwards in a grape shot against the crab's underbelly. She saved a bit of magic to be ready to catch Sweetie. and scarcely any more to shield herself from the stone shrapnel. The building's windows in the immediate area were shattered from the debris, but the crab remained unscathed. It turned to face her in heavy steps, the claw with Sweetie held tight while the other swung at Rarity in a wide arc. Again, Rarity dove out of the way, rolling inside the broken storefront. Her fur was marred with dots of crimson from the nicks and cuts of the broken glass littering the floor. She ran through the store to the stairwell to the second floor. The claw swept through the second floor windows and several of the load-bearing structures. The rest of the building above her creaked and shuddered around her as she ran towards the windows and dove out. She landed on top of the rust-coloured carapace of the crab's body, and the building started to fold in on itself and topple over. Rarity grabbed a piece of the falling rubble and aimed it at the beast. The chunk of debris hit it like a meteor, but only managed to stagger it briefly. The rest of the building fell over across the road, blocking it from advancing any further inland. Regaining its step, it rotated itself to turn to the sea along with Sweetie Belle as it started to retreat. The crab intended to claim one last victim. Its free claw reached over to sever her from her mane. "Don't you dare!" Rarity sprinted across the crab's back with her sword and swung at one of its protruding eye stalks. Seeing the attack coming, it retracted its eyes in time to avoid her slash. The crab's body lurched to one side, sending Rarity skittering off the smooth edge and falling to the sand of the beach. Rarity's heart fell as Sweetie's screams were suddenly silenced. Her eyes clenched shut, but she could still hear the muted thud of her little sister's body landing in the sand. Rarity felt her legs fail her as she too fell into the sand in crippling grief. Her chest ached with an agony beyond words. There was only her pain, and the lapping water of the shore, and the rumble of the coming storm clouds. As quickly as she had been overcome with grief, it was replaced with pure, undulated rage. She opened her eyes, but her vision was blurred with tears and red. The great beast lifted a leg to continue departing. The air rushed out of Rarity's lungs in a noise that sounded nothing like any mare or feral beast, but every bitter battle cry of absolute rancor. She ran and put herself between the giant crab and the water, cutting off its escape. "No! I'm not letting you get away to terrorize some pony else someday," she snarled. The manicured sand beach bellied the once rocky shore that used to line Horseshoe Bay, but Rarity could feel it beneath her hooves. Her magic called out to it. A boulder burst up from the sand at the crab like a cannonball, and then another, and another, driving it back with a furious salvo. The crab staggered and Rarity grabbed one of its legs with her magic, much like another constellation creature, the Ursa Minor. It was no mere oversized animal. It was a supernatural titan that was resistant to magic, and she was no savant mage like Princess Twilight Sparkle. The grip of her magic faltered as it tried to pull its leg away from her. She poured more of her effort into her hold, barring the leg, just long enough for her to bring in another boulder like a wrecking ball to its leg joint, snapping the hinge inverted. It sounded like a tree trunk snapping in half, followed by a shrill hiss from the creature. The armor of the leg might have been impervious, but the leg was nonetheless broken. Even so, it had 5 others, and they were all scurrying towards her in rapid stabs. Rarity bobbed and weaved from the legs, giving them only sand to strike. Another well-placed boulder halted its advance once more, but the next shot was blocked by the broad side of its claw, shielding itself from the barrage. It reared up a front leg to stab at her again, and she rolled away to dodge it. But it was a feint. As she rolled, the other claws swung across the haymaker, grabbing her by her mane and lifting her into the air. Rarity's world flashed white with the pain of being lifted by her hair, and with the lightning strike from the storm, the crash of thunder came right on its heels as the midday sky grew dark and the rain started to pour. Rarity flailed with her sword in panic at the claw holding her. She would do just as well to stop a speeding train with a twig. Vast in the wetness of the cool rain, the crab's eyes re-emerged to peer up at its tiny adversary. Held aloft in its grip, Rarity glared back down at it in seething hatred. With the dark storm clouds blotting out the sun, the rusty orange shell of the crab shimmered with an ethereal aura. Points of light dotted its back with interconnecting lines, like the lines of a star constellation. The brightest star, the one she saw first, sat at its head, glowing right between its eyes, the wishing star. Starlight, star bright, first star I see tonight. I wish I may, I wish I might, have this wish I wish tonight. The crab's other claw creaked open as it moved towards her neck. Rarity swung her sword over her head and sliced off her own mane. She fell with her sword under her like a spear, with the full weight of her hooves against the hilt guard. Rarity recalled so many fanciful wishes she had made upon a star as a filly. So many things. She had wanted such petty things. She wanted wealth. She wanted fame. She wanted beauty, talent, and a Prince Charming. But in that moment, none of that mattered. There was only one thing Rarity wanted. Only one thing she could wish for, if she could, as she dove the entire length of the blade into the crab's brightest star. Through her grit teeth, her growling voice shook along with every muscle in her body. I want my sister back, you son of a bitch! Epilogue. Rarity lurched with a start in her chair. Her jaw ached from gritting her teeth in her sleep. Her pulse was racing from the adrenaline rush of the dream. Her bounding heart was all she could hear. Sitting alone in the hospital waiting room, her hooves nervously held the handles of the gift bag in front of her. On the other side of the room, the door opened and Nurse Redheart waved for her to follow. Opening the door to oncology, Rarity could barely bring herself to look at her little sister in the hospital bed. Her eyes followed the chemo IV line down to her hoof under the warming blanket. Rarity felt her jaw tense again. It's not fair, she thought. It should be me, not her. She doesn't deserve this. No pony does. But it should be me, not her. She balled her hoof into a tight, angry fist. This should be my fight. She wanted so much to just punch something, punch the sickness right out of her sister. She was almost unrecognizable without her fur. She looked so frail, but it belied Sweetie's strength of spirit, bright and alive in her rich, green eyes as she blinked them open. Rarity's anger enveloped in a flash. She didn't want Sweetie to see her like that. Princess Luna's words from the dream echoed in her ear. This is not a monster that is defeated by destroying what we hate, but by saving that which we love. Sweetie squinted at Rarity and tilted her head in confusion. Before she could even speak, Rarity shushed her and opened the bag she had brought, presenting her gift and placing it on her little sister's head. This should help keep your head warm. Once it was in place, Sweetie Belle reached up and touched it. You can't, but I already have, Rarity said with finality. You can give it back once. Rarity felt her throat closing up. Once you're better. Sweetie Belle's eyes watered as she felt the violet locks draping over her shoulders with her hoof. Rarity blushed and she touched her own bare scalp where her luxurious curled mane had once been, fashioned now into a wig adorning her little sister. She leaned over and hugged her. It looks better on you anyway. Author's note. Seriously, fuck cancer. I just wanted to make sure that my mane looks best for its... Sweetie Belle gave a natural huff. Over the course of the year, the sun would rise in a the medieval suits of armour in the windows of the museum front. Sweetie Belle shrieked as she continued to flail at her captor's